Hi guys, I'm the Impaired Grappler and welcome to my podcast. Today we have a very special guest. It's my friend Rob Williams, who's up in Queensland at the moment. So we basically get into his early days, including sort of doing challenge matches and that, meeting the Gracies, going to Brazil, his history of injuries, his neck and back issues, and getting amnesia and recovering from that, which is pretty fascinating. He talks about sort of meeting Pedro Sauer and the impact of that on his jiu-jitsu. Also talk about his competition days. Then there was a sort of act of God. There was a power outage. So we came back a couple of days later and finished off the conversation, which ended up making it a bit of a longer one, but it was still pretty good. We came back and spoke about a home invasion of his that he had, and his mountain biking, including building trails and coaching and his business and all that sort of stuff. We go into psychology, talk about routines, lists, mental health, and the impacts of the lockdown on mental health. And then he turned the tables and basically asked me a few questions and spoke about my kind of issues, my history, my injuries, and then we go into sort of diet, and we finish up talking about moving through the ranks. So hope you guys enjoy, and we'll catch you later. Us. Hi guys, I'm the Impaired Grappler, and welcome to my podcast. Today we have a special guest from north of the border, someone who left when he could a few years ago. So it's Rob Williams, who's now in sunny Queensland. So welcome, Rob.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So just want to touch on a few things, just have a bit of a conversation, just a friendly chat. So what's things like north of the border without the stringent lockdowns?
Well, it's beautiful and sunny and nice and warm. And I basically live in a forest here, so I kind of live in paradise, surface paradise, ironically. But no, everything's great. Even during like when we had a lockdown, I think one of the things that has allowed Queenslanders to kind of do so well during it is the fact that there's just so much space here. Like you can go to the beach or go to the forest, or we're not living on top of each other or anything like that. Melbourne's a super densely populated city, whereas we're not. It's very spread out. We've got a giant state, so it's pretty easy for everyone to kind of avoid one another. So life didn't really change that much for me at all. I spent most of my time as a professional trail builder building mountain biking and hiking trails in the forest. So I really don't see anybody at all. The other guys on the crew were always 50 or 100 meters from each other most of the time. So, I'm also a mountain bike coach now. So, like coaching all the kids groups and stuff like that had to change. But for a lot of people, there didn't seem to be the people that I associate with anyway, everybody just mountain biked more. So bike sales have gone through the roof. Forests are overrun with people on bikes and all that sort of stuff. I don't know, like up here it's been fine. And even if you do get isolated, it's beautiful and warm and it's nice to be outside and everything else. But I can't imagine middle of winter being locked down in Melbourne. It was horrible anyway. It was all cold, miserable and everything, and you go out wearing big jackets and all that. And then just add on top of that the inability to be able to go out and get all the vitamin D that's going to make you feel good, and and all these sorts of things. It's got to be awful down there. So I really feel for everyone down there. And
it hasn't been that bad a winter cold wise.
It's not a great situation. So
it's been it's pretty tough, but
especially for the jiu-jitsu guys, right? So for a lot of people, and myself included, and many others, like one of the things I love about jiu-jitsu is that for people who maybe kind of are not the most sociable creatures in the world, it allows them a way to be sociable, a way to connect with other people, like choking and strangling and beating each other up. It's kind of like your way of connecting with people. I think especially for guys, guys are not the best at connecting and communicating and showing closeness and being intimate. And yet the great irony is that jiu-jitsu is nothing but physical intimacy. Like, you can't do it without touching the other person. So I think for a lot of people drawn to jiu-jitsu, and for the guys who maybe struggle to develop intimacy and connection with people, they're probably missing that connection with those people the most. And I really feel for the jiu-jitsu community worldwide through all of this. I hate seeing all the jiu-jitsu coaches trying to do like Zoom classes by themselves on the floor and try and maintain a semblance of connection with their students. It hurts me something terrible to see the people that I love and care for worldwide kind of have to, who usually their academies are full of thousands of people, and you see giant photos with everyone hugging everybody and strangling each other and doing all these great things, and then then you've got photos of guys by themselves on Facebook, and that's what their life is now. And like, it kills me to see that. Yeah, it's super difficult watching it as someone who, like, although I'm not a full-time coach or even a part-time coach or anything now, like, I know what that person feels like. I did it for so long, and if I was in their situation, I don't know how I'd be handling it. Like, financially, you'd be getting crushed, and emotionally, you'd be distraught, and it would be an incredibly difficult time for. I mean, me being me, I would probably just be wrestling with people in my garage and just not telling anybody, like, And if we all got coronavirus, well, it's our own damn fault. Like, jiu-jitsu is very addictive for a number of reasons, and the intimacy and connection that we form as guys, I think, is a large part of that.
Yeah, well, that's a main thing I take out of the jiu-jitsu is just the connection. It forces me to actually be human and connect with other people. Like,
yeah, I grew up in a pretty difficult family, and I don't know about socially inept, but I was a loner and kept to myself and preferred individual sports and all these sorts of things. And the martial arts that I pursued were all striking arts because the other guy was there and I could just hit him and do things to him. And I enjoyed the violence of hurting somebody else and doing these things. And then when it came to jiu-jitsu, it was very confronting for me. Not just did I get my ass kicked, but like, the person is right literally in your face, breathing on you, choking you, watching you as you're going to sleep, or watching you struggle, and there's nothing you can do. You're stuck underneath somebody, and like, you can't hit them, you can't do anything to them. Like, you have to accept that you're just there and have to deal with the situation. Like, the number of times I wanted to just cry on the mat when I first started, but the ego in me wouldn't let me. But like, yeah, there's some horrendous early on battles that went for hours, and I just refused to give in. And yeah, it's and I think that of all the martial arts and all the sports that I've been a part of, like, it's by far the one that really helps you kind of get in touch with who you need to be, you know, to move through life and become a more complete person and things like that. And I think it attracts a lot of martial arts in general, just attracts a lot of damaged people, because we're vulnerable. That's why we pursue it. We want to feel safe, and we want to feel strong when we feel weak and things like that. So I think that when you first get there, like, you don't get all those things. You don't get strong. You don't get self-confidence. You don't get all that initially. Initially, you just feel terrible. Well, in the old days, like, academies have changed a lot. When I first went along, I mean, I was a pain in the ass. I was like a 95-kilo wrecking machine, and I just wanted to kill everybody. So I walked into the academy with a friend of mine after challenging a whole bunch of other jiu-jitsu schools that night. And literally walked in with our T-shirts torn with blood all over our hands from fighting other schools, and walked in and just said, right, let's fight. Like, what do you got? Not knowing that there was a big difference between Japanese jiu-jitsu and Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And then I really got my ass kicked and got beat up and choked unconscious a lot and stuff like that, and just thought it was amazing.
So that was around the 90s? Mid
90,
90s?
summer of 97.
Summer of 97. Okay.
Summer
Yeah.
of 97. Yeah.
Yeah, sweet. And it was like, so back then there was like hardly anyone around. There was what, maybe one black belt in the country at the time, maybe,
Well, I
in
was in
terms
New
of the
Zealand. I was
Brazilian.
in New Zealand
Oh,
at the
you were,
time.
okay.
So um, when I started, there were no black belts. Like there was none. Our coach was a Pan Am blue belt champion, and he was a microbiologist. So he would travel the world, going to microbiology seminars all over the place, and wherever he went, he told us he would get the course notes for the seminar conference he was going to, and then he'd run around all the local jiu-jitsu academies, learning everything he could and making notes and compiling videos on it, and then come back to the academy, which had like maybe 10 guys in it at that stage, and just try and practice all the stuff that he'd learned, and so that's we were down the South Island of New Zealand, isolated from pretty much everywhere, but he was traveling the world, getting all the knowledge from everybody that he could, and bringing it to us. So in 98 maybe, John Will came over and did a seminar, and that was the first black belt I'd ever seen, in my life, and he invited me to come to Melbourne, right? So that's how I ended up in Melbourne, because John Will's like, hey, if you want to come and train, like, hit me up. I didn't know he was in Torquay, like Geelong rather, right? So I got to Melbourne, got my security license, found somewhere to live. I'm like, right, let's get to jiu-jitsu. And it was like 2 hours away or something. And I'm like, what? I thought you were in Melbourne. So I was like, bummer. So then I hooked up with Tyrone Cross, who had a jiu-jitsu academy. And I didn't know about this whole Gracie Machado war going on. So I walk in and all my Gracie jiu-jitsu stuff into this Machado academy. Everybody wants to kill me. I'm happy to punch on. Let's go. And it nearly came to blows every night. And I was like, man, what's going on here? This is just crazy. Unbeknownst to me, I was living just around the corner from the Gracie Academy in St Kilda. So Peter DeBean's academy. So I literally walked home a different way one night and walked straight past the Gracie Academy. And I was like, holy cow, there's a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy here. Incredible. Went upstairs. Pete DeBean was teaching in Malaysia at the time, doing a seminar series. And so I was like, I just walked in. At that stage, I was like the highest ranked guy in the academy, because like jiu-jitsu had just started. So they're like, oh, do you want to teach us? I'm like, okay. So all of a sudden I'm teaching at Pete DeBean's academy. We've never even met. And yeah, it was real interesting. Because everyone learned to do leg locks, right? So I'd been training with a bunch of Russian guys doing nothing but leg locks for a long time. And so I was teaching leg locks at Pete's place, and they don't learn leg locks. So,
some dude came in and taught us all leg locks.
So Pete turns up. He walks through the door, right? I'd been there for like 3 weeks teaching them. And Pete walks through in a civilian clothes. And I see who it is, so I thought, I'll play a joke, right? So I'm like, and I did the same with Royler and most of the guys that I meet. I pretend I don't know who they are. So I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'm Rob. Welcome to the academy. I'll get you a gi. We'll get you started, right? And he's like, shocked. And then I'm like, no, I know who you are, Pete, and all the rest. And he goes, what are you doing? And I said, well, I turned up 3 weeks ago. They wanted to learn leg locks. You're doing what? Oh, we've been doing leg locks every class. And he's like, well, we don't do leg locks here. And I'm like, oh, okay. Bad me. But I stayed there for probably, I don't know, 6 months or so. And he kind of used me as what do they call them? Pedro talks about them all the time. The enforcer, right? So I was like the enforcer guy, like 95, 96 kilos, and I liked scrapping. So any new guy that walked through the door that wanted to do like the Gracie challenge or thought he was tough, Pete would go, hey, go see Rob in the corner, he'll sort you out, And yeah, it was pretty funny for quite a while.
So what was it like with all the challenges back then? Was it
for me,
that many back in Melbourne? Or
well, I was one of those guys. I was that guy, right? I walked into the academy and challenged them, but I didn't know anything. I was doing Aikido. I'd done a lot of different martial arts all my life. And it was my Aikido instructor who said, hey man, you should go and try Jiu-Jitsu. Like, you're a real physical guy and you love human mechanics, hence why I was drawn to Aikido. And he goes, it's kind of like real physical Aikido wrestling kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, well, my mate was a pro boxer, so he and I decided to go around the 3 or 4 jiu-jitsu schools in our area and just test them. Like, that's what we did. We just walked in and said, we'll fight you. Because if they couldn't beat us up, we didn't want to train there. So that's how I ended up starting. I was that guy. And then because notoriety of jiu-jitsu, like the UFC had started maybe, I guess, like 5 or 6 years before or something, maybe 5 years before. So we had the UFC playing in the academy when I was a white belt, like day one. And I was working as a security guard in a big nightclub, and I used to get the UFC videos and take them to work and put them up on the big screen in the nightclub, like 50 feet wide, this giant screen of, like, you imagine UFC 1, right, going on this 50-foot screen in the middle of the nightclub, 2,500 people on the dance floor. It was mad, and my bosses. So it just started to get popular. And then, like, I won the Nationals first year, so I was in the paper, so people would challenge me on the door, and then people would come in and constantly to challenge us in the academy, because it was like that, anytime, anywhere, any place kind of thing that was going on. So we were getting challenged all the time. Even as white belts, the coach would be like, who's up for fighting? And we would just fight. Like, we'd beat the snot out of each other all night, every night. The thing at our Jiu-Jitsu academy, the Academy of Combat, was that you had to be able to kick, punch, throw, grapple, and do weapons. So it was a giant Thai boxing academy. Then, of course, he found out, and they did a lot of weapon stuff there, Filipino discriminator kind of stuff. And then Jiu-Jitsu was like the last art that had come along, that had joined this like trilogy. So because he wanted people to become complete martial arts, if you wanted to get graded in Jiu-Jitsu, you had to get graded in the other things as well, or at least be competent in them. So with all my other martial arts background, then I thought this was just an excellent idea, and I believed in, complete martial artist is a great idea. So we were doing challenges then. Then when I came to Melbourne, I didn't really have a plan to become a Jiu-Jitsu coach at all. When I was in New Zealand, I wanted to go fight in the UFC, and everybody told me, with all the other martial arts that I'd done, then like 100%, like I was watching the guys in the early UFCs going, these guys can't fight. They don't know what they're doing. The strikers were good at striking, but none of them could wrestle or grapple, and then nobody could throw, and then the guys that could throw couldn't strike, and I was kind of pretty well-rounded. So all my friends were just like, holy cow, you were tailor-made for this. And so I got in contact with Relson Gracie, and I got in contact with Ken Shamrock, who was running the Lions Den. Ken said, come over. And I said, look, I'm going to go to Australia and train under this John Will black belt guy and get better at grappling, and then I'm coming to the Lions Den. So that was my original plan, right, was to go to the UFC via Australia. So the thing with John Will didn't really happen. I ended up with Pete, and then, we ended up going our own ways. And Melbourne isn't a very violent society, right? Like Sydney and Brisbane with the surf culture has got a lot more going on, and rugby league and stuff. And so Melbourne was more kind of this coffee culture, kind of slightly sophisticated city. So there was no real violence. Even working in all the nightclubs that I worked in, like, there was very little violence compared to the clubs in New Zealand I was working in. So that started to pacify me. I was in less fights. There was a less violent kind of culture. I was feeling less threatened. Now I'm kind of doing jiu-jitsu with this gi on. I'm not hitting people. And like MMA was illegal at that stage. So I'm like, well, there's no MMA outlet. So I started getting kind of more interested in this jiu-jitsu thing. I ended up leaving Pete Devine, and I had a whole bunch of students. So I'm like, well, I'll just teach you what I know and I'll do what my coach did, right? Run around and get knowledge and do all this sort of stuff. And it was after doing that for a while that I'm like, I've got to get graded here. I'm like, I'd been blue belt forever. I'd been winning everything nonstop for years and years and years. I think I was blue belt for like 4 years. And so Pete had said that he would look after me in terms of grading and stuff, and then things changed. So I thought, right, well, I want to stay on this Gracie path. Like, who can I go see? And I'm like, I can't go to Brazil. I don't speak Portuguese. They're not going to understand me. And I found Relson Gracie in Hawaii. And I'm like, I know Relson. I sent him that message or email or letter or whatever it was back in those days. He sent me like a whole box full of Relson Gracie paraphernalia, the stuff that got me in trouble with the Machados early on. So I'm like, right, I'm going to go see Relson. And I didn't even tell him. I just turned up on his doorstep, right? And I was asleep again on my gi outside the academy. And he's like, what are you doing? Because it was a Sunday, apparently. I got my days messed up with traveling. And so I'm like, let's train. He's like, no, I'm here to do book work. Let's train. No, so he goes, come back tomorrow. So stayed there for about a month or so, trained with the guys pretty intensely. There's a big tournament there. I ended up winning that. So me and the Relson Gracie guys were pretty tight. I see you did a podcast. Oh, no, it wasn't you. There's a thing with Phil Cardella earlier that I saw pop up on Facebook. So I'm good friends with Phil and all the guys in Hawaii, very good friends with Relson, very good friends with Mike Stewart Jr. now. And so Relson was, I would say, instrumental without a doubt in the change of me as a person, I'd been there for, I don't know, a week maybe. And all the guys are like, right, because in New Zealand it was really common for us to like kill each other all week. Friday night was fight night. So because we had all the different arts in the place and everyone hated the jiu-jitsu guys, so we would have like no rules fights on Friday nights in the full-size boxing ring. So you put your name on a board, put your weight, what you want to do, and you fight on Friday nights. Everyone pulls out the plastic chairs and bottles of bourbon. They get drunk, everyone fights. And then you go out to nightclubs and then you fight in the nightclubs. And that was normal. That's part of the fight culture. So then I get to Hawaii. I'd seen Relson and Gracie's in action. I knew he was like pretty aggressive kind of guy. And then he's like, we're going to go to a bar later. Do you want to come? Yeah, right. So I'm all amped up. We're going to punch on. It's going to be great. And we go to a juice bar. Like he's vegetarian or something, does yoga. Like we're there drinking juice. I'm like, what are we doing? When are we going out? Who are we going to fight? He's like, what are you doing, man? Settle down. Like, so it was funny that anybody that knows Relson and the rest of the Gracie family, that of everybody, it's Relson telling me to settle down, right? Hey, man, like you don't need to be so angry all the time. You don't have to be so aggressive all the the time. Because when I fought
that sounds funny.
Yeah, it is. If you know all the crew, right, it's very funny. And so I was void of a father figure for a really long time, and here's Relson kind of the guy that the last guy I thought would give me that sort of advice, going, man, chill out. We're just having some juices and some salads, and we're going to get up early and go surfing and do some yoga, and then we'll come back and we'll have some good jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, what is going on here? I don't get this. It's the last thing I expected, but it was kind of permission from somebody a long way up the chain saying, hey, look, like this is how you're going to get better at jiu-jitsu. You don't need to be like, my dad was the total opposite. He was in this Rhodesian military, and as a kid growing up, if I didn't come home with scalps, if I wasn't like trying to break people on the mat doing judo, if I wasn't breaking bones and knocking people out even at a young age, I'd get a hiding at home, and I won like a karate trophy when I was young. I came home real excited with it. And he's like, did you knock everybody out? I'm like, it was a points tournament. And he just broke the trophy over his knee and kicked the shit out of me. So Like, that's the way I was brought up, right? Like,
yeah. Cobra Kai.
worse, right? So like I got asked to leave like most of the martial arts that I joined when I was young because I was just like over the top violent, trying to kill everybody there. And so now I've got Relson, like he's like second in charge in the grade, third below Helio, now telling me like I don't need to be like this. And it was revolutionary, and I was quite confused. And so then Royler turned up. Royler had a no rules fight going on in Hawaii at the time. Met Royler. Royler's like, "Hey man, come to Rio next year. Come to the World Champs and come to the academy." And so like then that connected me with Royler. Of course, I turn up in Rio, no gi. Like with no gi, I don't even take a gi to Rio with me, right? And so I'm on the mat for I don't know. Well, I wasn't allowed to train. I didn't have a gi, so I sat on the gi for like on the mat for like 8 hours the first day. And then Royler goes to go home. He's like, "Where are you staying?" I go, "I'm staying with you, aren't I?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" I go, "Well, you invited me to Rio, man. Like, you can't invite me here and like not put me up." So who did he call? And you know who he called probably. Who do you think he called?
Our professor?
Breno.
Breno?
Breno Sivak, right?
Professor
So
Breno?
that's how Breno and I met. So
okay.
Breno turns up, and then I stay with Breno for a couple of months every year, and I'm part of the Gracie team.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, but Breno's another interesting character.
Real interesting, right? Really funny guy, and it's so funny, like hearing from multiple sources about the same periods of jiu-jitsu. Like, I mean, all the stuff that was going on in Rio with all the challenge matches and Hickson fighting guys at the beach and like the whole Machado Gracie war that was going on. And I'd heard it from all these different angles. And there's Breno is kind of like this almost kind of quiet kind of bystander, not like deeply entrenched in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but not a part of the family himself directly. And then very good friends with Hickson and everybody else. So it was, and all I didn't expect any of this. It all just kind of happened. I wasn't like looking to become a Gracie affiliate or anything like that. They asked me to represent them because I just turned up and I had this attitude, and like at that stage, then I'd kind of settled down a bit, but like also I wouldn't back down from a challenge. So when I go to Rio and then some Brazilian guy that doesn't speak English like has attitude with me, then I'm like, okay, like let's do this. I don't care. I'm fine with this. And they really like that, like they like that kind of bravado and self-confidence. And it was Holker actually that said, "Hey man, like, what's this whole Ground Zero thing?" And I'm like, "Well, that's just the name of my academy. We fight on the ground. My academy's in the city." And he goes, "Where's the Gracie thing?" And I'm like, "I don't know." Like, and he goes, "You should represent us, man. We like you a lot." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I'm not paying affiliate fees. I've been through all that drama before and seen all these things collapse and explode because of that."
Yeah, and if you start using their name, there could be issues with that. Why are you using our name? As well. So it's like
I'd seen so many of that, and that happened so much because in the early days there wasn't like professional contracts. It was like a handshake or an elbow bump or something or whatever it was. And people were like, "Yeah, man, like I'll pay you this per month, whatever." And then something happens, and you got fighters, man. Everybody's a fighter, and then they wonder why there's conflict. You've got fighters doing business deals with other fighters, and there's no written agreement. Of course, it's going to go south, right? Yeah. So I've seen all that, and I'm like, no, like I'm not interested in that. But like, if you'd like me to represent you, then I don't know, have a word to Royler. Royler's kind of my coach or whatever. We'll work something out if you want. I'd love to represent you guys, but like I'm not paying affiliation fees, And then Royler had a word to me. "Hey, Holker said this, and we would like to do this." So I'm like, all right, like I'll tell you what, you guys can come to my academy anytime you want. Yeah. And you can run seminars there and take every cent. Yeah. because it was tradition back in the day. I don't know what it's like now. When you run a seminar, the school hosting the seminar would put like an extra 10% on top, and that would be a little money for them, right? That was kind of the done thing. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to take 1 cent, because what were they doing with that 10%? Paying their affiliation fees, right? So I'm like, well, let's just do away with all that silliness, right? Let's just do like a barter system, right? So I'll represent you to the best of my ability, and you know, I was deeply entrenched in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and stuff like that, the whole philosophy behind it, and so I'm like, and then you can come to my academy. So I had Sauer and Shanda come over. Sauer might have come once. Shanda used to come over every year. Royler would come every year. Hoist, the whole family started coming over and doing seminars at my place and things like that. And it was all going great, you know, and it just kind of worked out because, I don't know, like there's not much to it. Just keep it real simple.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
my relationship with them deepened, and then I was like a purple belt over there, and then Royler was like, do you know Breno? I'm like, yeah, we smash this team, you know, like, you know, and he's like, what do you mean? Like, he's one of my students. He should be your coach over there. You guys should be friends. And I'm like, oh, he's under you. He's like, yeah, I'll introduce you. I'm like, okay, cool. So then that kind of formalized a relationship with me and Breno, and he was kind of my Australian coach then. So I'd travel up to Sydney and train under him. Eventually got my black belt under him. And so, yeah, it was kind of a funny way to kind of go about the whole thing. It's like, you know, what was happening with my coach kind of eventually ended up happening with me. And then I was traveling around getting all this random knowledge. And then eventually an affiliation was kind of made, and met the guys. And I don't know, I think that meeting all the Gracie family members that I did, I don't know, I never treated them as particularly special. I think that, you know, what they've done is special, but I don't know, I just don't treat them any different than anybody else. I think that everybody deserves respect equally, but I don't know, I was just like, I've always trained under super high level coaches in all my martial arts. So like the Gracie family have done amazing things, but in terms of training under high level guys, it was normal for me. And I guess having a lack of father figure, I kind of had these mentors as father figures, so I had a kind of a different relationship that I was, I guess, subconsciously seeking from them and getting from them, that was maybe a little bit more intimate and a little bit more personable than like just a student. And it'd kind of been like that all my life. So especially when I met Relson, and he and I kind of gelled a lot, maybe he could see a lot of himself in me and where I was headed, and was trying to curtail that a little bit. Yeah, it was a real interesting journey, and yeah, I miss it a lot. You know, especially at the moment. Like, I've got a saying: when it rains, I train. So when it's raining, I'm training. So up here in Brisbane, we've got Carlos Collar, whose brother Lindorfer Collar was a black belt in New Zealand. I met him at my first nationals, and ironically, we met at the urinal. And he's like, "Hey, I'm Lindorfer Collar. How you doing?" I was running around doing flying arm bars on everybody because I saw it in a kung fu movie the night before. And he's like, "Where do you train?" It's serious, true.
Yeah.
I'd never done one in my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was running around. He's like, "Who are you? What do you do?" He goes, "Oh, I'm Lindorfer Collar. I'm a Hickson Gracie Baker." I'm like, "Oh yeah, no big deal. I'll get one of those too one day. See you later." You know, and I kind of just wrote the whole thing off. I thought jiu-jitsu black belts were just normal. You know, I'll get one. You know,
Yeah.
Hickson's just a dude. You know,
Well, I think they actually respect, and I think they're attracted to people that don't treat them like that. That like aren't like fanboys of them, sort of thing.
It's like any sort of musician or superstar or anybody that's high up in their field. You know, like, they want a sense of normality. They want to be around people that just treat them normally. And, you know, I wasn't disrespectful, or I don't think I was. But, yeah, just treating them as like normal human beings who just love what they do are good at it.
Mm.
Uh,
So did you
so
meet
yeah,
Helio? Did you meet
yeah, yeah,
Helio? Yeah.
yeah. So of
So
course,
tell us about that.
Breno's like his kid, right? So as soon as I was living with Breno, and Breno kind of, it was real funny because the way I was brought up is like it's rude to ask, right? Yeah. And so I'd stayed with Breno for a couple of years. And he's like, you're not passionate about your jiu-jitsu. You don't care. You're living with a fourth degree black belt. You don't ask me nothing. And I'm like, I was waiting for you to offer. Because it's rude to ask, right? That's the way I was brought up. He thought I wasn't into jiu-jitsu seriously because I wasn't asking him anything. And he was really offended. And then we found out it. But anyway, so when I was staying with Breno, he would talk about Helio all the time, like he's like kind of like his uncle or grandfather or something, because he was really young when he met him, and they had a really good relationship, from what I understand. It was very, very close to Royler. Royler's super close to Helio, because he's like the little guy in the family, and Helio is kind of like a little guy, so they kind of have this like little guy jiu-jitsu thing going on. Anybody over 80 kilos, forget about it, doesn't want to know about him. Like in the academy in Rio, he would split the room into, like, he had 2 rooms. Have you been to Gracie Humaitai?
Yeah.
Yeah? So there's 2 rooms, right? So one room would be like where Royler was, where all the guys under 80 kilos, and the big, heavy, tough guys that can't do jiu-jitsu go into the other room, right? Yeah. And he always put me in the other room. I'm like, I'm 79 kilos. So anyway, the first year that I was over there, which was 2003, Royler decided to get a bus and take all the guys from Gracie Humaitai out to meet Helio. So it became like an annual thing, is that every year we'd go out and hang out. And then when Breno, because Helio wouldn't speak Portuguese, so Breno, I was hanging out and I was giving Helio a hard time, like just joking, right? And so Breno was kind of translating for me, because I was standing in one of Helio's rooms, all his trophies and that were. And Helio comes in with Breno. And so I've got the translator there. And he was like, where are you from and all the rest. And I don't know, like, he's a bit of a different dude. You've probably heard a lot about Helio, Most of it's pretty good. Some of it's a little bit odd. But amazing. Like, we were out there one day and you're fine. Just like, you don't need to be quiet. It's fine. And so Helio was there, and we had a bunch of guys. It was pre-world champs, for like a month out from the worlds or something. And so Helio was talking about, like patience and jiu-jitsu and all these sorts of things and concepts. And, he got, I can't remember who it was that he got, some like multiple time world champion, and just told the guy to try and choke him. I think he put him in the mouth or something. Try and choke me. And the guy couldn't do anything, right? Or was he escaping the mouth? It's one of the two things, right? And the guy couldn't do anything to Helio. And then they reversed positions, and Helio just played with the guy. It was quite an amazing thing to see. And every single year he would do a similar thing. And you've seen Pedro do amazing jiu-jitsu as well, and do demonstrations of leverage and stuff like that. Like a lot of people who are not, it sounds bad, but like if you don't, from that lineage or whatever, you just don't see that kind of jiu-jitsu, And for the most part, it's like put a hand on the collar, pull on the hander, and put 2 hands on the collar and squeeze, and that's a choke. But you're saying you saw that you were very lucky. You met Pedro pretty early on. You were the first coach, pretty much, other than Phil.
Well, Phil pretty much took me to Nexus under Murat, but I was under Pedro. Then Pedro came along and got my blue belt from him.
So you would start to see like Murat's super technical through Pedro and all. So you start. So your first experience was like amazing, right? Like fear was normal then, but if you'd gone to like XYZ Jiu-Jitsu, I won't name names, then you wouldn't have got that at all. And when you did see it, it seemed like some sort of magic. you
Hmm.
know. So
Well,
yeah,
if I didn't get my blue belt from Pedro, I don't know if I'd still be doing it, and like without his sort of inspiration kind of thing,
yeah.
and
Pedro,
like
Pedro
wanting to sort of come back. Look, so I was sort of injured after that with my injuries and all that, and I was like off for like a year, but then Pedro came back again, and I'm like, oh, I've got to go back for Pedro, and so, yeah, that's what I sort of started back. I was just mainly doing stuff, arm in the belt, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, and then the technique and everything just evolving over the years, and just like there's so much depth, and it's like, gee, and then you go back and watch a video from 5 years ago, and it's like still so much awesome stuff in there, technique wise, and
Like
but
the
yeah,
more you
it's yeah, and it's more than just technique; it's the feel and everything. It's kind of like a whole different perspective of jiu-jitsu that they have.
and also for you, like every time I've been injured, whether I've broken a leg or smashed a shoulder or elbow or something, like, but you're permanently in the situation where you're having to learn to use the rest of your body to compensate, right? Like
Mm,
you can't be inefficient because you've only got 3 limbs,
yeah, that's
right?
it.
3.5 maybe, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you can't cheat and use strength because most strength is done with symmetry, right?
mm,
Like trying to push a barbell versus trying to use dumbbells or sitting on a Swiss ball. So like that's why you get a lot of respect from a lot of people because they know what you're having to do on a permanent basis.
mm.
And Pedro would have seen it. Like the struggle that you're having to go through, like, is very unique, and you get a lot of respect for it.
Yeah, well, I'll just keep going, and then it's like all of a sudden,
See,
wow,
see, and
yeah.
like,
It's just woke up.
but you can say yes. Like you do have a unique struggle that you're going through,
Mm,
and no problem. Um, and people are inspired by you. It's probably one of the I don't know one of the main reasons why you do the podcast. But it's like everybody who does jiu-jitsu probably wonders like what would happen if something like that happened to me.
mm,
Like, could I continue? Would I continue? How would my jiu-jitsu change? And I've been through similar things: busting my neck, busting my back, learning to walk again, crawling and stuff like that for
mm.
years. Um, and but like I'm very luckily I've been able to recover from that, and my body's pretty good. But like you have a permanent thing, it sounds like, right?
Mm.
That's
Yeah,
not going to get any better.
pretty
So
much. Yeah.
yeah,
Also, we're talking about that. Touch on like you like when you were training with us for a little while before you went to Queensland. You had your back issues. I think
yeah.
uh, you might have. I think you've mostly resolved it in terms of pain. Can you talk about
Well,
that and
yeah, yeah.
what modalities you've learned and all that sort of stuff?
Oh, there's a bunch of stuff. So what happened was the week before I got my black belt, which is so we're going back to like 2000 and I think it's like 7 or something. I should know this. I think December 15th, 2007. So the week before, of course, you're still there?
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
just close the
So,
window.
so as always, like the worst thing you can do is decide to have a light grapple before you go to a competition or something, right?
Mm.
We'll just go light, one last one, right? And so me and another brown belt guy that I like a lot, we're just having a light roll. Obviously, it had been a long 10 years leading up to it. There's a lot going through your mind. It's a very, very, you would have seen it lots, seen the guys leading up to their black belt, they start to go through the self-doubt. It's a huge, huge thing. You'll only ever kind of do it once. So I'm having this light roll with this guy and, we're sweating quite a bit because it was summer. And I went to switch out from underneath an all fours position and he went to scamper around behind me and he slipped in some sweat. So I was posted on my arm, on my elbow, from my switch out from underneath all fours, and he slipped and fell on me. So his whole body weight landed on my head sideways. So there's nowhere for me to go because I'm locked to the floor, yeah, right? And my head can't go anywhere. And it just sounded like a whole bunch of celery snapping, snap, because it was only us in the academy, just two of us, no music, nothing. So it was real loud. And we both just stopped and looked at each other, and I rubbed my neck, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, I can't believe, I just thought I broke my neck. Something went really wrong, but there was no pain or anything. Zero. I'm like, oh shit, got away scot-free with something. Went to Sydney I went on this whole big drive, this like thing, got my black belt, came back, opened my big new academy, right? And everything was going great. Amazing, right? It's a giant academy. We've got aircon, million students, everything's great. Got my black belt. Life's amazing. So it's about maybe a month later after all of that. And I've been out mountain biking, and I was sitting in my van driving through Ringwood, and I'm sitting in traffic, as you do in Ringwood on the main street. And then my first thought was that I'd been rear-ended by another car, because I just got this searing pain from my neck to down to my tail, my spine, and I lost my vision, right? So I fell into the front of my van. I crawl out. I thought, I had this thing in my head that the car was going to explode, because you see it in movies, right? Mm. So I crawl out of that. I crawl across between the parked cars onto the footpath, and I try and stand up. And my legs are like this, like jelly. And I fall down, and I try and get up, and it's like I'm on roller skates or something. And I couldn't walk. The great irony is that I was right in front of a chiropractor's office. And I crawled in and crawled up to reception, and I was in shock. And they put me in traction. Like, they put this leather, I'll never forget, it was terrifying. They put this leather helmet thing around my head and strapped me to this board like a water board and stretched me out. And that's the last thing I remember. I can't remember how I got home. I don't remember most of the next week. The next thing I remember after that is being in my sports doctor's office, and he's like, it's over. He goes, it's all over, you know. He goes, if you get a bump on the chin in the wrong way, you're going to be a quadriplegic. So I'd prolapsed 3 discs in my neck, maybe herniated one of them. It was pretty severe, and I just opened this giant new academy. I had affiliate academies and stuff by that stage, and I'm like, me being me, I'm like, I just don't quit. I don't stop, you know. So I've got a saying, persistence overcomes resistance. Yeah. And so I've had that my whole life. I used to read ninja books when I was a kid, and apparently the ninja saying means keep going. And I just had this whole thing in my head that I was a ninja and stuff when I was a kid. And so I just had this thing, and then my dad's military stuff, like, you just don't give up. You go until you're dead. So I'm like, well, I couldn't hold if I was lying on the ground, I couldn't lift my head off the floor. Like, it was that bad. So for 3 years after that, I just taught guard stuff, because I couldn't really afford to get on top. So I would hold my head and lie on the floor, place my head on the floor, and go, all right, let's go. So I don't know if we've been on the mat together, but if ever you paid any attention, you'll notice no one ever gets to grab my head, because I'm really super good at deflecting everything. You can't grab my head anytime. So, like, literally, if anybody grabbed my head, I thought I was going to die or become a quadriplegic. So that's what I mean, where you get an injury and it leads you down a whole path you never would have experienced otherwise. And you get super good in these defensive areas usually.
And you're hypersensitive towards that region and protecting it.
Well, you have to be. Like, what's the key ingredient in jiu-jitsu? Be early, right? Well, when you're looking at being a quadriplegic, you're going to be real fucking early, right? Use my language. You're going to be really on point, and you're just watching anything that's going to come near your head. And so it's very hard to cross-face my head, and I developed this weird kind of jiu-jitsu as a result. And I stopped competing, and it influenced my jiu-jitsu a lot. And it wasn't long after that I met Pedro. So Murat sent me a poster, and I didn't even know who Pedro Sauer was. Murat sent me a poster. I saw the guy's picture with like 1 million stripes on his belt. And I'm like, who the hell is this guy? He's not a Gracie. Like, he's wearing a Gracie thing. I don't know who he is. So I went to the seminar, and Pedro and I gelled immediately because he was showing black belt moves, and then he was showing other grade moves. And I didn't even go hang with the black belts. Like, I just went straight and hung out with all the white belts and helped them with their stuff. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm helping them with the thing. And he goes, why aren't you over there with all the black belts doing the black belt thing? I go, well, I've kind of already got it. And he goes, have you practiced it? I'm like, no, I saw you do it. Because I'm hyper visual, right? Visual connect. So if I can see it, pretty much I can do it. So he's like, show me then. So I showed him, and he's like, oh, okay, what's your name again? So there was this like, I'm interested in helping people, like I'm a coach, like that's my drive. I'm not out for myself kind of thing. And I think he kind of saw that. We got chatting. Obviously, he knows Royler very, very well. So I had the Royler connection. And I could tell by the way he was walking, there was something going on with his back. And so, because of my background in sports science, we got talking about stuff. I helped him out a bit. And then he's like, you should come and see me sometime. We should hang out some more. Yeah. And I'm like, well, where do you live? And he goes, DC. I'm like, oh, cool. I go, when are you there next? And he goes, like 3 weeks' time. I'm like, okay, I'll see you then. And he was staying with Phil. I heard the found this out later. So he goes home and he asks Phil, he goes, hey, do you know this like Rob guy? And Phil's like, yeah, he was my first jiu-jitsu coach. And he goes like, oh, he taught you. He's like, yeah. And like Elkie and all these other dudes. Oh, so you know him, cool. He reckons he's coming to see me. And Phil's like, he's probably already there, man. And so when because Phil knows me, right? He knows what I'm like. I just turn up. I just go, right, that's what I'm doing. Let's go. And so when Pedro walked into the academy in DC a few weeks later, I'd already been in the academy the whole day, you know, like since it opened in the morning. And so, yeah, like Pedro's a really special guy. And again, he's very, very super good friends with Relson. So when he and I got talking over pizza and stuff about the whole Relson thing and what I'd been through, the transformation that I'd been through, what had happened with my neck and how it started to change me as a person, then Pedro and I kind of became really close. And I wanted to become a Pedro affiliate, but there was a whole lot of stuff in the way. So I'm like, I don't care, man. Like, you know, like I don't have like a coach. Yeah. Like, you know, Royler, I'll be forever grateful for everything he's taught me. Great relationship with him. Same with Breno, same with Relson, same with Pedro. To me, they're all one. They're all friends. Everyone gets along. It's just jiu-jitsu and we're all the same kind of family. And I kind of hate, this is my only coach. Like for me, that doesn't really work. And so Pedro and I became very, very good friends. And he started to alter my jiu-jitsu because I was still kind of had this thuggish kind of jiu-jitsu going on. And because of what had happened with my neck, I couldn't run. I couldn't lift weights. There was a lot of stuff that I'd had to dump. And, you know, and of course I'd given up competing and all that. Then some other Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts set up academies near my academy, Carlos Vieira being one of them. So there was a lot of competing black belts, guys who were black belts who currently competed, and I had a very strong competition team. So there was a lot of pressure from my team for me to represent them. They wanted to have a coach who they could support like the other teams could support their coaches. Kind of stupid because you wouldn't expect, like I always bring up the whole Mike Tyson Customato thing, right? Like Customato wasn't out there representing Tyson, right? He's a coach. Coaches coach and fighters fight. So, but I was silly enough to kind of wilt to the pressure and decided to compete. And I hadn't competed in years. Everybody kind of knew my story. Went out in my gi in my weight division, won my first fight in like 30 seconds. Movie star stuff. Everyone cheered because everyone knew what I'd been through. And that was all great. I went home. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then Pete Devine rings me that night and he's like, hey, nobody will fight Big Mick. You know, Mick Wilson, he's like 140 kilo black belt. No one will fight him in the no-gi. Will you fight him? And I'm like, well, sure. Why not? You know? So I'd fought Mick lots before. He's a nice guy. He's a big dude. He's not malicious in any way. But during our match, I felt like a little click in my back. Just a click, like clicking your knuckles or something. It was a nothing. Paid no attention to it. And then a few weeks later, I got a spasm. Oh, what was that? Some little sharp spike. That just started to continue and get worse and worse and more frequent. And then my sports doctor's like, right, go and get some physio done, test your core strength, go do Pilates, go do yoga, go swimming, go do all this stuff. None of it worked, to continue to get worse. And then he's like, all right, cortisone shot. That helped for like a year. So like, boom, I'm back again, doing all my jiu-jitsu, going crazy, and everything was great. But when that wore off in about a year, then started going downhill pretty badly. And maybe a year and a half after the cortisone shot, I literally rang him one morning and I'm like, dude, I can't walk. I can't even get out of bed. So an ambulance sent me down to the medical center, MRI, CT scans, the whole thing on my back. And they're like, man, we don't know what's going on. So they went and cut a whole lot of nerves around the area to try and alleviate the pain. That made it worse. So now I'm on a worse state than I was before. So like, yeah, I spent the next 2 years like just crawling around the house, but I was on the mat every single day. I don't think I missed a day. So I've always got my garage matted out. At that point when I couldn't walk, I had to close the academy. So Ground Zero ended up closing. All the schools under Ground Zero ended up pretty much closing, and I sent everybody over to Absolute. So he got like 80 students in one day. He was very happy. Yeah, a few of my students would just come round. I'd crawl down the stairs, crawl through the house, push the garage door opener, and just that same mentality, which is like, I'm just going to lie here. And like, if I was lying on the ground, I couldn't lift my feet off the ground. Like my legs were like dead. So I just lie there and go, okay, smash me. And and the guys would just pummel me from that position. And like, I was super happy just doing that. Like, just to have that human contact.
All right, guys, we had a bit of act of God there. As Rob was talking, I had a catastrophic power failure due to a tree taking out a power post and power lines in the court opposite us. Lucky no one was injured, but it was a pretty catastrophic failure. So that was fine. Didn't have power for a few hours, but now our water's actually, our whole water in the region's gone because of the electricity going out. So somehow our water got affected from that. So we're just waiting to hear back when we can get when the water's sort of safe enough again. Hey?
With Victoria, it's COVID-19's killing you, and now power outages and sewage stuff and water treatment. And
yeah, it's just like, it seems all to be coming together. Like, it was just so close because it was like while we were doing the last podcast, I accidentally left the windows, well, the start of this podcast, which was the other day, I left cracking the windows open, but the wind was so ferocious. Like, I kept looking around because like the wind was blowing so much inside. I thought the lights and everything was going to go flying. So I was like, shit, I should have turned the window off, closed the window. but then the tree came down. So lucky today there was another tree next to it, a massive tall gum tree, and they cut that back today. So it's just massive, just dead post now. Yeah, so act of God. So sorry about that. So basically, yeah, we're just talking about the injuries and your back issues and having to crawl to the door and stuff like that, and crawling to the mats, and then playing just like in the guard, and was it guard or mount? A guard, and telling people to come after me and all that. So if did you want to continue on that note, or
probably like the first kind of major kind of thing that happened to me, and I mean, it's really funny because like you don't want jiu-jitsu to sound like it's a bad thing, that it's riddled with injuries, but inevitably it is for the majority, for a lot of people. And the more time, like most people aren't going to suffer some catastrophic injury. Like they're going to train a couple of times a week for a few hours, like they'll get some sore fingers or something, right? But like me being the obsessive compulsive that I am, it was like literally day one, I came in and challenged the guys in the academy and got beat up really nicely. The next morning I turned up before the doors open, and I'm there until the doors close. And it was like that for 20 years, so it was like 8 hours a day, all day, every day. And that's the way I like to approach things. It's kind of sink or swim kind of thing. So like I mentioned that it was funny that at my first national championships, the night before we were watching like kung fu movies, and there was this guy doing flying armbar things, right, in this kung fu movie. So the next day I'm walking out onto the mat to grip up with this like guy in my first match, and I don't know why, but my brain went, hey, do that thing you saw in the movie last night. So I did it, and it worked. It was a flying armbar, right? And I tapped the guy in like 10 seconds, and everybody went mad, and I freaked out. And I'm like, hey, that's a cool thing. Like that ends fights really quickly. I'll just keep doing that. And it just kept going and going and going, and it kept working. And then on like the Monday when I went back to the academy, somebody said, hey, look, show us that move. And it's not something I'd ever practiced. I just saw it literally in a kung fu movie and tried it, and it worked. And so I tried it before class, and I landed on my head. Like I didn't know this. This is just what I was told, because I came to standing in front of the mirror in the changing room. And I'm standing there like looking at myself holding onto the sink in a gi, wondering what the hell is going on. Like, what is this thing, and what am I wearing, and where am I? And a guy who was my best friend came into the changing room and asked if I was okay. And I'm like, I kind of know you, don't I? They called my girlfriend, who of course I had no idea who she was. She picked me up, took me to the hospital, and the doctor was like,
total amnesia.
Yeah, like I didn't know where I was. I didn't know why I was wearing a gi. I didn't know the people around me, absolutely zero. And the doctor goes, like, I'm sitting there in my jiu-jitsu gi in the doctor's office. And he's like, because like after you concussed, you feel kind of drunk. And he's like, I was kind of laughing with everybody at reception in the hospital and stuff, because I'm in a martial arts gi. People are there with broken limbs or whatever. I thought it was kind of funny, everything going on. But then he's like, oh, like apparently you do martial arts and you've hurt yourself doing that. Do you remember anything? No. And he goes, are you any good at it? And I went, well, apparently I'm the national champion. He goes, but do you remember how to do it? And I'm like, I've got no idea. Like, I don't even know why I'm wearing this silly outfit. So he said to my girlfriend, like, like he's not allowed to sleep, because if I went to sleep, I could slip into a coma. And it was pretty serious. And it was literally the next weekend there was going to be a championship in our academy. And the whole week, my coach was telling me to fight in it. And I'm like, look, I don't know how to do this. Like, I literally had no idea. I'd brought back a video cassette of me fighting in the weekend that I had at home that my girlfriend put in there's a VCR thing. And I'm like, I couldn't believe that it was me even doing that stuff. But then again, I didn't know the city I was in, and I didn't know anything. And it was really funny because a few of the guys apparently that I'd beaten in the Nationals the week prior had come down to my academy to get revenge, and my coach convinced me to fight. But I had no idea. It's like just grabbing some random guy off the street and putting a belt on him and go fight in a jiu-jitsu tournament. And I didn't know. I just remember being terrified. Yeah. And the guy grabbed my leg, threw me on the ground and grabbed my leg, and it hurt a lot what he was doing. So I just screamed, and they said just tap the mat. So I don't even know if I tapped the mat. I think I just screamed loudly and the guy stopped. And they were jumping around and cheering and stuff like this because they'd beaten this guy. Apparently, I'd won all my matches at the Nationals really easily, apparently. And so these guys had come to seek revenge. And it was years later, 10 years later or more, that I ran into that guy and we had a chat at a tournament. And he had no idea what had happened to me. And he's like, oh, now I feel really bad. I thought I'd got revenge, but you didn't even know what was going on. And I'm like, no, I didn't even know how to do my belt up. And it was quite terrifying because I knew nothing. I've been a professional athlete for most of my life and been doing jiu-jitsu incredibly seriously. And I read through, I've got a diary. I still have a diary. I write in every day, and I always have, since I was maybe 13 or 12 or something. And so all I did was read back through that to kind of find out about who I was and what I did. But I was too scared to leave the house because I tried leaving the house and I got lost a lot. So I just stayed at home and drank beer and played video games. And I didn't even like video games and I didn't like beer. But I'm quite serious, right? And my girlfriend was like, you don't like beer. Why are you drinking beer? And I'm like, I just want beer. She's like, you don't even like video games. You're like this athlete guy. And I'm like, don't know. I just want to play video games and stay inside. And I remember that first night going home and taking off my gi because I was 95, 96 kilos, 5% body fat. And I took off my jacket when I got home in front of this mirror. And I was like, holy cow, look at me. I was look like a superhero. I'm like, whoa, get that. Right? I probably didn't think I had to work for it, right? Because it was already just there. And it was, the whole thing was really crazy. And so my partner took me around and introduced me to my friends, and I read through my diary. But I was too scared to do jiu-jitsu because of that first experience, going out of the tournament, getting flogged and feeling embarrassed. But I read through my diary and I really didn't do anything else. All I did was run up this big hill behind the house and go mountain biking and lift weights and do jiu-jitsu. And that's kind of all that was in my diary. So I would go to the academy and kind of sit there and just watch class and make excuses about headaches. But the reality was I was this guy that I wasn't anymore. I didn't know any of this stuff. I had no idea, but people had this, I guess, kind of expectation around me, and I felt that expectation. But eventually I got on the mat and it was interesting because feelings that I had about quitting and stuff like that, when I felt like I'd just leave it behind, there were these weird feelings that would come up that would drive me forwards that are obviously part of my makeup, but that I wasn't aware of. And so I got back on the mat and started learning things, and yeah, it was really quite bizarre. And people often ask me what do you think you've forgotten? I'm like, well, I can't remember what I've forgotten because I forgot it, right? I don't know, I don't know what's real between what I've read in my diary and what people have told me and what has actually happened. Because some things like from my early childhood and stuff like that have come back, but I still doubt some of those images that I'm kind of retelling, because I don't know if it's just what mum's told me or whether it actually happened. So that was pretty scary. And I just kind of wrote it off as a bit of a fluke. But I guess now with social media being what it is, there's more of these things being documented, people landing on their head and breaking their backs. And when I damaged my back, then it was really funny, because when I kind of mentioned it, then I started to realize, and when I did more research, I found out it was relatively common for people to damage necks and backs and stuff like that in jiu-jitsu. It was quite common, because we're really trying to like hurt the other person, not in nice academies, but it's kind of like playing rugby, right? The goal is just get the ball across the other side of the line, but there's catastrophic injuries that are really common. But that's not the goal. It's the same in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to practice breaking someone's arm and breaking their neck and breaking their legs, but you just tap to prevent that, So, of course, on that journey to establishing those things, then things will happen. So, I've had, even before then, like I've had a life of excessive exercise and excessive sport, and with that comes a lot of injuries.
I can understand that.
So like that's like when I met Pedro and could start to understand, because again, I said that my goal was to go to the UFC, so like the UFC is like, let's just break this other person. Like there's almost no rules. And when I was looking at it, there were basically no rules. You couldn't eye gouge or bite, and you weren't allowed to groin strike, and that was it. So I'm like, okay, well, I can do anything I want to like try and kill this person without killing them, and I'm going to be pretty much okay. And that was kind of what I liked about jiu-jitsu, because with my dad's upbringing, with his military mentality, just smash everybody, and then going to these different martial arts where there were rules, then I was constantly asked to leave the academy or dojo or whatever it was, because I was getting fed two things. I'd go home and Dad would say, just go to class and like try and kill everybody. And then I would do that, wanting to appease my father, and then I'd get in trouble, and then I'd get asked to leave. And then Mum would get a phone call saying, hey, he's not welcome back. And then she's like, well, what else do you want to do? I'm like, oh, well, I'll go do this other thing, right? And then the same thing would happen again. So when I met Pedro and when I met Relson, then it kind of changed my mentality a lot, that the goal wasn't to like hurt people. It was in fact the opposite. It was like, let's see how technical and precise we can make this art, and whilst avoiding hurting the other person, And so it was incredible for me to get that and to start to learn Pedro's style of doing jiu-jitsu, and to kind of start unraveling the onion, as it were, right? I use the onion analogy a lot. And when you start unraveling it and going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and breaking things down, and you're grinning because you understand exactly what I'm talking about, is that you start to reach a level of understanding that, I don't know, it's almost so deep that like I would even forget that there's somebody in front of me. I'm really just trying to solve problems and deal with things on such a subtle level that it doesn't even feel like a fight anymore, And I remember a weird instance where I was working on the door doing security, and there was like a mass brawl, maybe 20, 25 guys all smashing each other. I was kind of in the middle of it all. And some guy grabbed me around the head from behind, and I immediately stepped behind him and grabbed the backs of his legs. Yeah, like it was pure instinct. Yeah,
muscle memory.
And, because you've drilled that so many times. And Like I just like when we're practicing, we have distinctive pauses through the technique, step by step. And those, a lot of people think that we shouldn't have those, but like they're kind of reassessment points, right?
Mm.
Get to that point, we can reassess, am I going to go left, right? Am I going to continue with this technique? Am I going to change and do another one? And I got to that point really quickly, like grab the back of this guy's legs. And the next step literally would, for me to be, have lifted him up and kind of DDT'd him onto his head behind me. But he sensed that, right? And he just goes, don't, right? Like that. I just remember him screaming, don't. And I was just like, and he let go of my head. And I can't remember what the rest that happened, but that was kind of one of the times when, you know, like jiu-jitsu pure jiu-jitsu kind of reared its head in the middle of some chaos that I was involved in. And
that was when you were, so was that like after your amnesia? Because like I actually wanted to talk about the muscle memory, like,
well, I mean,
like you went back to jiu-jitsu, you didn't know anything, but then you just...
nothing, zero, nothing like
but
at
then,
all. Well, no,
that...
I just practiced like everybody else. But what I think, and again, I'm not sure what I was like before, but because I had nowhere else to go, I'd literally just sit at home all day and drink beer and play video games. And then eventually I got bored, and my girlfriend and her mum just said to me, look, you're going to have to get out of the house and do something. But I was literally too scared to go anywhere. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what just nothing, like zero. It's a blank slate and it's terrifying. And so the safe place for you was like just where you are, like in your room, in the house. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah. I actually want to touch on that as well in a sec.
Yeah.
Go back to the
it was just
playing games sort of thing.
Well, it was only one game really. Like I just played Doom because like I don't know why. I felt this desire to play video games. And I never had, I mean, I played Space Invaders and stuff when I was a kid, but like I'm talking when I'm 27 years old, all of a sudden, like I just go, I want a case of beer and I want to buy a video game.
So do you think that was like needed? That was like a rest period you needed?
I have no idea. Like literally, this is literally within a couple of days after it happened. You know, like the very night that I went home, and he said, because I was living with my girlfriend and her mum, and the girlfriend drove me home from the hospital, get home, and I go to say hi to her mum, and her mum kind of just wanders off. And I'm like, oh. She goes, oh, you and mum don't get along. And I'm like, oh. She seems kind of nice. Like I didn't know anything, right? Nothing. And so then I'm like, I want to drink some beer. And she's like, hey, look, I don't think that's a good idea. The doctor said, you know, and I'm like, look, that's what I want. Let's just go do that. And then so I convinced her to get me like a big case of beer. And she goes, you don't even drink beer. You don't like beer. Like you like bourbon. And it's still true. But like for that period, I just wanted to drink beer and play video games. And then I just got, I guess it was a push from her and her mum saying, look, get out of the house, go do something. And I was getting bored. So I go, what do I do? And she's like, well, you run up the hill behind the house all the time. You always go to the gym and, you know, you must have written your diaries, all this crap that you do. And I'm like, yeah, but, and then I tried running up this big hill behind the house and I'm like, that's really hard. Like, I probably don't want to do that much, you know, like
especially if you forget how to run properly.
Well, it wasn't even that. It was just a desire. Like there was no desire, like to do any of this stuff. And so out of boredom, I would start going to the Jiu-Jitsu Academy at night and just watching, you know, like I was bored and I wanted to join a class or I wanted to try it, but there was a part of me that was too scared to because of the expectations that others had on me. I just won the nationals the week before, like, and now I don't know what's going on, you know. And you know, the probably this is kind of odd to mention, but like this is how weird it was. I was sitting there at the academy one night, and this quite attractive girl sat beside me, and she's like, "Why is she here?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Who are you?" She goes, I'm the girl that you're cheating on your girlfriend with. Right. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. Like, I don't know anything. And she's like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, no, like, I don't know who you are. Right. Like, I had no idea of like my life at all.
Did your
And
accent change?
well, I was just like then, but not like literally. In my head, I'd only known my girlfriend for 2 or 3 days, so I'm like, wait up, this
Yeah.
girl's pretty cute. Like I could swap girlfriends and like, but obviously I was cheating on her. I didn't even know about it, right? Like, and I'm like, oh, anyway. Um, but weird things like that would come up, like you like bourbon, you don't like beer, you don't play video games, and now you do, and it was just really, really odd. But eventually, I would just watch what was going on the mat, and I don't know if that's part of how I became so visual kinetic with the whole jiu-jitsu thing. Is that I don't remember what it was like before, but I remember having to sit there and just intensely watching what was going on and trying to pick it up and trying to figure out what was going on so that eventually when I did get back onto the mat, then that was kind of like how I learned. I learned by watching. And so, that kind of became a staple of like my thing. Like I don't really need to do it. If I can see it, if I can watch it, then I can understand the mechanics and I can see the steps in it. So then if I go to do it, like I could probably recall it if I really thought about it. But I remember being in a tournament years later, like, and I'm talking mid 2000s, and there was a martial arts magazine called Blitz here.
Yeah.
And I remember they had step-by-step pictures of sequences. And I remember being on the mat mid-tournament and just pulling up a step-by-step sequence from Blitz and doing it, and it worked. And I went, oh, that's weird. Like that thing just happened, where I can see things and then pick them up and just do them. But whoever it was in Blitz, thank you very much. It was great. But it was just odd. And then I kind of got into it, and then the nationals rolled around the next year. Yeah. And I'm like, right, I'm going to go and do this thing. And I had pretty much the same results, flogged everybody, did really well. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not comfortable being at the top of the mountain here. Like I want to do more. I want to get better. What's above me? I like climbing. The UFC had been something I was really interested in. And so I'm like, right, like, let's go do this thing. And then John Willard come over, as I explained, and came to Melbourne, and the whole running an academy and setting up jiu-jitsu academies and affiliates and all that sort of stuff, just it wasn't a part of my plan, but it was the best thing for me as a person, because if I'd gone down the whole MMA route pretty seriously, then it wouldn't have been good for me. Like I was
concussions as well.
I wouldn't have been concerned about that. I was just like,
no, but like the effect you would have been different now. You would have been like slower, slurring you. Well, maybe not. Who knows?
I don't know. Like literally, I never really thought about I changed the way that I did flying arm bars for sure. Like, because then I eventually learned about what they were like. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I probably shouldn't like jump up that high and do all this stuff. And I found a new way to kind of enter into them. I put my hand on the floor and like post and jump into them. But then I broke a couple of guys' knees doing that, so that probably wasn't good either. But sorry, Larry Papadopoulos. I don't know. It's just the whole thing's been a really bizarre journey through jiu-jitsu, and injuries are part of it. Injuries are a part of any sport, and like I miss jiu-jitsu terribly, and I wouldn't want. I mean, since moving to the Gold Coast, I had a couple of small, like little coaching things I was doing up here for small clubs and stuff like that. I've always got mats in my garage, and I became good friends with Carlos Collar up here, and who's in Brisbane, about 45 minutes north of me. So
is it base?
Base Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah, I think it was hat on. Yep, there we go.
Yeah,
there we go. Always wearing his hat.
Yeah.
And
no, he's a good man.
I like him a lot.
Professor.
Yeah. Like again, meeting Carlos was, again, it's always these like fighter guys, right? And we're all very similar. That when the majority of guys meet each other, that there's a little bit of bravado and there's a little bit of like there's some barriers there. But as a black belt, when you walk into a new academy with my injury history, stuff like that, it's always really scary for me because I'm like, I don't know what I'm walking into. And like when I was recovering from my neck injury, for example, the great irony was I was wondering about who I could trust with my neck.
Yep.
And you there?
Yeah, keep talking.
Yeah. And so I was like, how do I test my neck without putting it at risk? And yet there was a guy, Adam, who was like my greatest competitor. He was from Sydney, then he lived in Thailand. I ended up flying over to him in Thailand to train with him just because for some reason I could trust the guy. It was really strange. So anyway, good friends with Carlos, went into the academy, and we spoke about a history. Where do you come from? Who do you know? All the rest, and then it's not so much the coach that's always the problem. It's always the high grades, the big burly purple belts and brown belts, and you're grinning because you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, it's
like they're the enforcers of the academy, and they just see the belt and a gi. You like looking at me physically. I look like I'm really fit, and I'm pretty fit, but you can't see what's underneath the skin. You can't see bone damage and all the stuff. I don't walk with some giant limp or anything else, right? So it's not an injury you can see. There's no limitations in the way that you would, Murat and a couple of guys have picked up like that I move a little bit weird on the mat. But for the most part, I've done really well to hide it, not deliberately, just I work around what I do.
Yeah.
And that's always scary for me. The first session at Carlos's gym was like being in a washing machine, just with these really super strong purple and brown belts, and me just going into like survival mode and not get hurt and stuff. But it was just awesome. And after a while, then he and I learned about each other and developed a really cool relationship. And of course, he's super good friends with Pedro. So when Pedro was over here, I was traveling around with him a little bit. No, it's just it's a part of my life that at the moment the whole COVID thing has kind of been on hold. Usually I'd be on the mat every few weeks, and usually it's a period like up here when it rains for like 2 weeks nonstop. Then I'll be on the mats up there like almost every day, and then boom, I'm gone because the rain stopped and I'm out. Bike coaching and building trails, and it's like that. But it's been really difficult. I think probably the coolest thing is that it's just inside me. Yeah, I could like pretty much not train for the next 10, 15 years or more, and if something happened, I know my body would just respond the right way.
That's what you want to be comfortable with. The muscle memory from drilling so many times.
Well, we had a home invader a few years ago in Melbourne. A guy like bust through our front door unexpectedly, and my partner had seen me train jiu-jitsu and things like this, but obviously at my age, not going out to nightclubs, getting in fights and all this sort of stuff. So when this dude came through the door and I kind of just took care of business, Like it was all over in like 10, 15 seconds and the guy was asleep, but she saw me put the guy to sleep and she said, I saw his eyes as you were putting him to sleep and he thought he was going to die. You know, like he was terrified, right? But I just put him to sleep, lay him on the ground, called the police, everything was fine. But, you know, that's really cool. You know, it's cool that you know inside yourself. And I think that for the longest time, as a pretty insecure kid growing up, even though I'd done a lot of martial arts, like nothing had really kind of subverted that insecurity that I had until I found jiu-jitsu. And even then, when I first found it, I was still super angry and really aggressive and you know, like what I went through with my back changed me as a person completely. If you, no doubt, probably if you speak to Phil or Alki that have known me for a very long time, then I'm a very different. Like I used to go out running for like an hour or two before. I used to run around Melbourne knocking on my students' doors on like a Saturday morning with 10K between their doors, knocking on their doors, reminding them to go to class that morning. Now, I'd do a 2-hour run all circumventing Melbourne to wake all my students up to get them to class the next morning, you know. And for them to see me going from that to like crawling was really difficult, I'm sure, for a lot of them. But just knowing that now that my body's okay, that I can look after myself, then that's a big thing. Because for a while there, for a couple of years there, like I couldn't. You know, we had a home invasion, another one, a couple of weeks after my first surgery, and there's nothing I could do. There was somebody known to me, you know, and they threatened me and threatened the missus and stuff like this, and there's really nothing I could have done, and that scared the hell out of me. It's the first time in my life I'd ever felt vulnerable, and it kind of changed my attitude towards gun laws. Because if that person decided to kill me, they could have done it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I could do about it. And I was like, wow, like this is what a lot of people feel like. Like this is what the majority of the public feel like. They feel vulnerable, you know, whether they're 18 or 80, like they all have the right to be able to defend themselves and feel safe in their own house. And I'd never got it until then. I'd always felt like Superman, and for the most part, I'd always been that way. But that day changed my life big time in terms of, you know, like how I felt. And then I started putting knives around the house and, you know, things like that. You know, I'm serious, you know, because I was absolutely terrified. And, you know, like it took years to get my body back to where I felt that if something happened, I could do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, can you go back to with the amnesia and actually reading your diary? Did you, and sort of just, I just want to sort of delve into a little bit if you got sort of any memories or anything to add to sort of like identity, like not knowing yourself, but then reading and then being detached and almost being like an observer of your life.
It was really like I was reading about somebody else. You know, it's like you picking up my diary tomorrow. Yeah. Right? And that's you now. You know, it really was, you know, and it's funny, like I'm getting all emotional about it now. Like I haven't thought about it for a long time. And yeah, it was very difficult. You know. Because
it's like
the night before, like I peeled off my top and I don't know, 95 kilo wrecking machine.
Yeah.
And but you don't know anything. Like you don't like that night. My girlfriend had the videotape from the weekend because I used to take a camera to the tournaments and film myself, and she had that. Because when we got home after the hospital, I'm like, what is this jiu-jitsu thing? And she goes, I'll show you what you do. and she put it in the VHR like beside the bed, and I'm like, oh, I was watching myself from a few days before, and I'm like, that's amazing, like
So
incredible, like but I'm like,
I guess you felt like Neo in the Matrix.
But it kind of was. I was doing some weird, freaky stuff, but I was like, that's just, I don't know. It was just, I just remember being scared. Like I would leave. I had a car and I could drive, so like the muscle memory of knowing how to drive was there. Like that was deep enough in my muscle memory that I could drive. But I would drive down the road and be lost. I didn't know where I was going. And I'd lived in that city for 10, 12 years or more. And then I'd get lonely, and then I'm like, hey, there's this guy that keeps popping up in the diary all the time. She's like, oh, I'll take you around to his place. So then I met my best friend. And I go to shake his hand. Hey, how you doing? I'm Rob. I know who you are, you dickhead. Like, what the hell's going on? You know, and it's really weird reading your diary, because when you read your diary, you're creating images and like a video in your head, but you don't know how accurate that is. And so you don't know what you can trust, but that's all you have. Like it's literally a clean slate. It's clean slate. Like I told you, the night I went home, I went to say hi to her mum, and her mum walked away from me. And then my girlfriend's like, oh, mum and you don't get along. And I was like, oh, she seems really nice. You know, like I had no preconception of my head. And it was really, like if I look back at the couple of years following that, it was really just all over the place. You know, I had no real direction other than going to jiu-jitsu. Like there was just this one thing that I did. You know, I'd get up and I'd do the stuff in my diary that I said that I always did, and then it just kind of became a part of my life, and then the people that were there became kind of my friends, and I guess it was kind of like an anchor for me in a lot of ways.
Memory is very difficult.
There was just nothing else. Like it's not like I was a mechanic and then I did jiu-jitsu part-time. Like all I did all day was jiu-jitsu and train for jiu-jitsu. You know, and then I rode bikes a lot because I read about riding bikes, and I had bikes and I could ride and do things like that. But it was really scary. Just the thing I remember the most was like that week leading between when it happened and then the tournament, like the next weekend. And like I rang my coach and I'm like, well, he rang me and he's like, how's your head going or what's going on? Because remember, you're fighting next weekend. And I'm like, dude, like, I don't know how to do jiu-jitsu. Like the doctor, I don't know. And he just couldn't comprehend. And he's a doctor. He's a microbiologist, right? And I don't know, like, if he thought that I was faking it. Like, I don't know, like, what was going through his head. Like, why would you? I was in hospital and I didn't know where the hell I was. I didn't even know how to do my belt up. And you're convincing me the next weekend, it was literally a week later, that I had to fight in a championship in our own academy. And I was like top guy in the school. But I'm like, I don't know jiu-jitsu, you know, like, but I also, because I'd said to him, no, but there was a part of me that's like, you've got to do this. Yeah. You've just got to do it. And I'm like, and I just remember walking onto the mat in this gi. It's like you're walking out onto Wimbledon and you've never played tennis in your life, you know? You know you're faking it. You've got your white outfit on, your tennis racket, but you kind of know how the game goes, but like you don't know how to do anything. And I felt just like that. Yeah. And then I don't know if you've ever heard the name Carl Weber from New Zealand. He's a kind of Valetudo guy. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt. And it was him. Carl came out and whipped my butt in like 10 seconds and I screamed like a little girl and they all cheered. you know. And then 10 years later at a tournament, I'm sitting beside Carl and we're having a bit of a gas bag, and he goes, dude, I went out and fought in a tournament at Box Hill and like, you know, float some guy, and then I sit down beside Carl and he's like, man, I can't believe I beat you so easily all those years ago. And I'm like, oh, shit, no one's ever told you. And he's like, what? And I went, hey, I'll tell you what happened. And then he's like, oh, man, like, I've been really pumped up about that for like 10 years, you know, because like you were the guy to beat, and then I came and beat you really easily, and I went home with my chest all puffed out, and then I find out like you didn't even know like who you were that week. You know, it was very funny.
Sounds like a good story for a Metamoros.
Oh,
you two have a rematch.
Well, there's better rematches for me than that. Like, yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. So can you talk about like all the mountain bike, you know, you're building the trails, you're out raking the countryside.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Life is really bizarre, right? So, yeah, like when my back got really super bad and I couldn't walk, I ended up leaving my wife, and I was literally sleeping on a friend's floor. No jiu-jitsu academies, no income. I couldn't get the dole or anything because technically I was still the director of a company. Homeless, I had like $500 in my wallet. That was everything. You know, like I was freaking out. I was really depressed, drinking a lot, and I could sleep on the floor, but because beds hurt me because they were too soft and stuff. And I had a friend call me, a guy call me, and he's like, "Hey, you know lots about bikes. I need help getting a bike, like sorting it out." Like, and I would do it for friends most of my life. I've always known a lot about bikes. I raced professionally in the 90s. But being broke makes you get very entrepreneurial. So I was like, hey, for like $200, I'll take you through the whole process. I'll call up the shops and I'll get you a $200 discount, which will absorb that fee to help you out. How's that sound? And he's like, sweet. I made $400 before lunchtime lying flat on my back. Now, for an athlete that's used his body his whole life to make money, that was revolutionary, right? Because we all think that we're as dumb as dog shit. So, right? So I was like, wow, this is a thing. And then my mate came home that day, I told him about what happened. He goes, hey, you're like a bike broker. I'm like, that's it. That's my thing. Because I needed some sort of an anchor. And I'm like, right, I'm the bike broker. Set up a little bike broker Facebook page, got a little website going, and I had something. So that provided a little bit of money for me to be able to eat and get by for a while. And then literally as soon as I started doing that, people wanted me to start coaching them. Yeah, because they would see stuff of me riding, and then they would see the bike broker and people buying new bikes with one coaching and stuff. But I couldn't walk. So I'm like, well, I actually can't walk, man. So like I don't think coaching is going to be possible. So I kind of had to put that on the back burner for quite a while. Eventually, and I'm talking 4 years later or something like that, then I could walk okay, and so I got some mountain bike coaching qualifications and started coaching and things like that. My partner's mum, because in the summer my back felt really good, and in the winter it felt really bad. And my partner's from the Gold Coast, so she's like, "Hey, it's really hot on the Gold Coast. You'd love it." When I very first came to Australia, I came to the Gold Coast and it was super warm, and I loved the environment up here, but there was no jiu-jitsu. So anyway, we ended up moving up here. My mum had cancer, we decided to move up here, and so I started doing a bit of bike coaching. The bike broker was doing its thing, and I was in the forest doing like a reconnaissance. Before each coaching session, I'd go out and ride the course, make sure it's safe. all the rest. I was doing that. I came across a guy who was sitting on a digger, digging up the track, doing some stuff. We had a bit of a chat. Turns out it was the owner of the company, and he invited me to come and trail build for him. Now, it's quite funny now because, like, I hadn't been able to pick up anything heavier than a vacuum cleaner for like 5 or 6 years. And now, literally, I'm in the forest picking up 50-kilo rocks, carrying them out of riverbeds up a hill to make this rock thing, right? And I remember him going, well, just go down there, though, pick up those rocks and bring them up here. And I was like, holy shit, how am I going to do that? Like, I was terrified, me picking up a rock. But I'm like, crap, I don't know, like, I'll just try, like, and I was terrified, and it was just incredibly difficult. And so I got through the first 3 months of doing that, and then he goes, hey, like, I was loving it. I would wake up and, like, we start work at 6 a.m. I'd be waking up at 4:30, doing yoga and stretching and stuff like this. Like, I've still got I can probably turn this, can I? I'll knock things over. But I always have all my mats and workout stuff and things on. Like, I will lie on the sofa, but for the most part, I spend all night sitting on the Swiss ball and balancing on this thing and doing the stretching and all that, right? So he goes, look, we've got a big project coming up in this forest. It's going to be like a 8-9 month project. You'll be living out there and hiking for hours a day and building all these trails. And I was like, wow, that sounds mad, and it was just incredible, like, I love being physically active. I love being outdoors. I can't sit down for very long. I love challenges. It seemed like it was a world first what they were doing. So I'm like, yeah, like, this is cool. It's kind of meaningful. And I just like trying to push myself all the time, like, what can I do? Like, where can I get back to? How physical can I make my life, and what can I survive?
It's a fine line, though, huh? Like, figuring out that line and not pushing yourself too hard, but when you actually do work,
I don't really have that line. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, with injuries, it's like, if you go too far, you're going to hurt.
Not really. Like,
if you push it sometimes,
me being me, no, not really. Like, I was just like, I'm just gonna like for me, going, what I'd gone through, even just building the local trails, I thought was like insurmountable for me. Like, it couldn't have. If you'd told me 2 years before, when I was crawling around the house, that I'd be doing that, I would never have believed you. Like, I came close to suicide twice because of the pain and the immobility and all that sort of stuff. And then 2 years later, to be able to do that, I was just like, this is like, no, like, part of like, I guess, my mental rehabilitation, the turning point for me was because it was a work cover thing, because essentially I'd hurt myself working, then you're invested in your own misery to get the payout, right? The more pain and misery you're in, the bigger your payout, and you're constantly questioned by work cover and your lawyers and everything else about how bad it is. There's a part of you that wants to downplay it. I'm a macho guy and it's not that bad, but then they really need to know the truth. And so when you tell them the truth about just how bad it is, they don't believe you. And so you're emotionally and physically invested in your own misery to get the result that you want, right? To get a big payout for what you're owed. To this date, it was 4 years ago I won that court case. I still haven't got $1. Yeah, I still don't have $1 because I said to them, I don't care anymore, because my mental and physical well-being is worth as soon as I decided that I was actually emotionally and physically invested in my own misery, and as soon as I decided to like let that go and decide to move forwards, and as soon as I started building this new life and it started kind of happening and unfolding, I was no longer invested in the past.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so all I do every day, like today's recovery day for me, I still ride 6, 7, 8 hours a day, most days of the week if I'm not working. I get up in the morning, I'm on my bike at 6, I'll get home at 3, stretching, like if I'm not trail building, or I'll be up at 4:30, 5 o'clock stretching, then I'll trail build all day, come home, do yoga and stuff. Like that's what I do. And in terms of the risks that I take on my bike and stuff like that, yes, that's managed. Yes, there's things that I won't do, that when I'm riding with friends who are younger or whatever, who are doing certain things, hitting big jumps and stuff like that, then I do think back to the consequences of what could go wrong and where I was. So in terms of that, yes. In terms of me actually physically pushing myself to exhaustion and stuff like at work the other week, I got a little back tweak. Turns out it was something to do with my bike setup. But we were lifting and moving big rocks that day, and I had to swallow my ego, because my ego is like, I had to say to the guys, look, I can't do that. I'll do something else. I grabbed my fire rakes and I went and raked the trail and did other things. But that self-preservation versus your ego is a big battle, because I wanted to jump on there and start trying to move these big rocks. But then my brain goes back and remembers what it was like crawling around the house, which these young guys whom I'm working with don't know anything about. They couldn't imagine that. They're infallible and invincible at their age. They haven't had a catastrophic injury like that. On the other hand, I don't like to not contribute equally. So it's a balancing act between, but then we've got kind of specialist tasks in a way. The guy's 31 years old, he's 6'4" and 130 kilos, and he's a mountain of a dude. He can move 200 kilo rocks around, right? Okay, you're good at that. You like doing that, so go do that. Like, I'm 50 years old with a broken body. I'm not going to go and risk it doing that. Yeah. So yeah, there is a measuring thing. There is a remembering of what it was like, and I have a greater appreciation of my body and stuff now than I probably ever have. But that happens with age, right?
Yeah, you learn a lot. But that's like it's real difficult. It takes a long time to actually like understand the feeling of your body and sensing it all. And to be honest, like when you see kids doing jiu-jitsu when they're babies, standing up in base and how they move like a little kid, it's just I kind of lost my train of thought there, but yeah, it's
can you pause the video for 2 seconds so I can go to the left?
Yeah, no worries. That's all right.
Cool, thank you.
All right, guys, we're back from the break. Now, I just wanted to talking about recovery modalities, what you're doing now. You just talked about ice, kind of the ice therapy, cold therapy that you do. In terms of modalities that people can use, and just if there's any general day-to-day stuff that you do that helps keep your body healthy, boost your immune system, especially now while people are stuck at home, everyone's in fear and, a bit restricted. So,
I think having spent years and years and years at home, like when I hurt my back, I was living on a floor. Then I was living in a caravan for like 6 months, a very small one. Then when I moved into a house, I wasn't comfortable out even going downstairs. Like I got used to small spaces. And then I was living in the house and pretty much just being pretty much confined to the house for years. I didn't go out and see friends. It took a long time for me to start going down to Leverage, for example.
Mm.
And Phil would be the first to tell you that I wasn't myself. I'd go down there. I'd be like, really, I didn't want to be the black belt standing at the front. Like, I wanted to just kind of be in the background and kind of.
Now you're pretty fragile.
Very, very.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just very, I don't know. It was such a culture shock for me. And it's very funny because I'm used to standing and competing in front of hundreds and thousands of people and standing in front of an academy full of people and teaching and having that confidence. And then, like, I couldn't even go to the supermarket. I like when I would have hundreds of spasms a day that would floor me. And when you try and go into public and you collapse at Centrelink, screaming in agony, you collapse at the supermarket and drop all your groceries, and it completely crushed me as a person, and I couldn't go out. I was too scared to leave the house. I go to the dog park. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I'd have my headphones on, and you just become a complete recluse. So what people are going through now with being at home, it's one of the reasons I can't stay indoors now. Like, if I come home and I sit around the house for half a day, I think I've still got PTSD from that long period of kind of being confined to home. Like, I get cabin fever very, very, very easily. I've got to get out of the house and do stuff. And for people who are not used to that, who in Melbourne are now going through those sorts of things again and again and again, my heart goes out to them, because they don't have a reason other than the whole COVID thing. Like, they could be physically fine, but the mental toll that it takes on you is incredible. So mentally and physically, the two go hand in hand. That you have to have a routine. You have to have a list of things that you do every day. Yeah. Right. And so my list when I was fit and healthy used to start off with go ride 100 kilometers, then do yoga, then have lunch, then sleep, then go to Jiu-Jitsu for 3 hours, then do this. So when I got really messed up at home, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start making lists to do each day. And it would start with get out of bed, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, have a shower, get onto the mat. Like, I'd have mats in my lounge all the time, and I would get on the mat and I would try and stretch and I would try and do things. And by making a list and then ticking off the things as you go, it shows progression. You look at the list and you cross off something and you can see the things that you did before that, and it shows that you're moving forwards. Yeah. So, I made contact with a guy a couple of days ago who's, broken his back or something riding motocross. And I reach out to people online who have had accidents and stuff. And what got me through was a mantra that I came up with, which is, it's probably not very original, but it was mine, which is any progress is progress. It doesn't matter what part of your life, whether you're studying or whether you're recovering from injury or whatever it is, any progress is progress. And that, what you see as a progress marker changes. So progress pre-back injury was riding 100 kilometers was good. And that changed to being able to actually get out of bed was good. So early on, I would just be incredibly depressed that I was constantly comparing who I was now to who I was. So looking back, depression is a consequence of looking back, and anxiety is a consequence of looking too far forwards. So, right, because you can't be anxious about the past. And you can't be depressed about the future, right? So when I gradually started, that's what I mean by being invested in misery in the past. As soon as I gave up the idea that I needed to be miserable to be able to win my court case and be successful with that, and that I no longer cared, like I turned up to a meeting with work cover and I basically said, I don't care anymore. And they were astounded, right? They probably thought it was some cunning plot, but I just went, look, I don't care. I said, I'm over it. I go, it's been years and I don't care. Like, I'm happy. My body's working. I've stopped doing what you wanted me to do because I had to go to all their physiotherapy and get all the crap done that they wanted. And so as soon as I started moving forwards, things started happening really well. So I stayed attached to that. So in terms of establishing a routine, every single morning I wake up and I get on my mat and I do like mobility stuff. Some would call it yoga, but I can't hold like yoga poses for a long period of time because of my back.
Yoga can go a bit too far sometimes.
Well, I just found like I started doing yoga and I like it. I did it for a long time and I really like it, but holding a pose for more than like 5 or 10 seconds hurt. As you get older, like stretching for long periods of time isn't as important as maintaining mobility. So stability and mobility are your two friends, right? Jiu-Jitsu, surfing, rock climbing, doesn't matter what it is, stability and mobility, right? So if you sit down for long periods of time, you're going to get gluteal atrophy. Basically, your ass muscles are going to get weak. Your core's going to turn to garbage. It's the middle of your body. You've got to look after it, right? So I wake up in the morning. I go through my little routine. I've got my Swiss ball thing there. I sit on that a little bit just to get all my core muscles firing in the morning. Then I go do whatever it is for the day, which is usually some sort of a physical thing. But in terms of mentally, I still have my checklist. I still write down everything that I want to accomplish that day. I still tick it off and cross it off. The podcast isn't there. It's going to get crossed off once I'm done, right? And that's just a part of like what I do. And it's, like you've got to create habits. Yeah, so you repeat the same as muscle memory, right? So you've got physical muscle memory and you've got mental muscle memory. And so if you want to change your lifestyle, if you're overweight or if you're unhealthy or if you're lazy or all three of those things usually, and you want to make a change, then you're going to have to, like, you can fake it till you make it, right? You can do that for sure. Yeah. Like you just do it. Just pretend you're something else. Like there's hundreds of movies about people that have pretended to be something that they're not and they become that thing. So you are what you do. Yeah. Like you might not lift weights now, but if you just go, you know what? I'm just going to start lifting weights. Guess what? Your body's going to start growing. You're going to start craving certain nutrients and eventually you're going to start looking like you lift weights. Yeah. So you just start doing those things. Yeah. Just start faking it. If you, and like I'm very interested in psychology, specifically sports and behavioral psychology. So Anthony Robbins is a great, for example, when I was sitting in my bed and I couldn't walk or move very much, then the way that I would start to counter my depression, because your physiology affects your mentality, right? When you sit upright and straight, you feel different than when you're all bent over. What are depressed people and people in pain like?
Hunched over.
Hunched over, right? I'm sitting in bed, so I'm like, right, that's what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to sit upright in bed, right? And literally like that, I couldn't walk, but I'm going to sit upright in bed. And instantly, after a few minutes, you feel better. And then all your postural muscles, because you're trying to sit upright, your postural muscles become stronger. And eventually, sitting upright and being upright and having better posture becomes normal, becomes who you are. And then, yeah, like small things like that make a big difference. And a lot of people aren't even aware that they exist. And, eventually I kind of got into dog training a bit and stuff like that. And dog training and teaching jiu-jitsu are very similar. So,
but the thing with the habits is it takes like, in terms of psychology, like maybe 30 to 45 days, maybe 60 days to get into a new habit.
Yeah, you've got to rep it, right?
So you got to do it. You got to do it until, and then after that initial month or two, then it's in your memory, and then you can like just easily do it. But you got to go through that hard first part and actually show up and do the thing. Yeah. And that's sort of the concerning thing with the lockdown, from going from 2 weeks to a month to over a year, 18 months, whatever. It's like after 4 to 6 weeks, there is a new normal, because it's been, from a psychological perspective, it's very fascinating to watch. But it's all
because people get fixated on the goal. Yeah, people who are struggling are like, 6 weeks, I'm going to get through this. In the military, they do it too, right? So one of the ways that they break soldiers down when they're going through selection for SAS and stuff like that is they go, all right, when you get to the top of the mountain over there, there's going to be a guy there, like they haven't slept for 3 days, they've had no food. Get to that top of the mountain, it's only another 12-hour hike. You get up there, there's going to be food and rest, and you're accepted. When they get up there, what happens? There's a guy there going, hey, look, see that mountain over there? When you get to that one, and that's what they want to try and do, is to try and get that sort of, to get you to not be fixated on one particular thing. Yeah. And that's why I think, suicide rates and all the rest, and, the mental harm that's been done by these constantly changing lockdowns, there's just no security. Like, there's no, for people who are used to some sort of a security, they're used to getting up and going to work and coming home and seeing the wife and going to the movies and doing these things, as well as we're incredibly social creatures. That's what separates humans from a lot of other species. We're incredibly social. We work best in groups. That's how we solve problems. That's where we get our strength from. That's what society is all about. And now people are locked down as individuals and suffering alone, and it terrifies me to see what's going on down there, because the small little dose of it that we got up here, like, I just completely ignored it, right? I just ran into the forest. I would get dressed up in my high-vis outfit and go to work every day for free. Yeah? I'd just go build trails every morning and keep the same routine, because I knew how important that routine was to me. But when you've got police and army around stopping you doing that, and you throw in jail and fined and all the other rest, then that's a completely different. That's a whole another level of mental gymnastics that you have to do to be able to get through that. And the majority of people are not equipped for that.
The confusion. Yeah, I think the confusing thing, the mixed messages, this is safe, that's not safe, this is good, this is bad.
They're good. No, they don't help. And this.
It's like negative, positive news.
Yeah.
It's like, if you having a goal and achieving it, like you were saying before, having the goal, that's like in the military. If you're on the offensive, like the SEALs would be more doing like offensive and like having operations, rather than sitting and defending a place, waiting for the people, waiting to be attacked, and there's a psychological difference between those. Between those like forms of thinking. And if the goal keeps changing, then it takes a strong will to sort of get through that. And part of the military will be breaking people.
Yeah, it does. It does break people for sure. Like for example, if you're married, for example, and you love your partner and you're used to seeing them all the time, and then you go away for a couple of weeks and you say, hey, I'll be home in 2 weeks. and then you call each other every couple of nights and reassure each other and things like that. And then you start to get excited about seeing each other again and things like that. And then the day before you go, oh, look, I'll be back in another 2 weeks. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
The excitement that you feel to accomplish and succeed and achieve that goal, and to be able to see that person, the excitement that all the adrenaline that you get is now crushed. And now you have to suffer through another. But if you'd originally said, I'll see you in 4 weeks, you wouldn't go through that same suffering. But you might in 4 weeks. Yeah. So the fact that they are constantly changing the goalposts and people are becoming fixated on the goalposts, or as I expect people are probably doing now, is the opposite, is that they're giving up. I think people are just going, you know what? I'm going to give up. I'm not going. There is no goal. There is no end to this, and I'm going to give up.
Yeah, and they won't release those numbers because it's against because it would be too devastating to the community. So they're not going to release those numbers.
Well,
and it's like the intelligence of the elites outweighs the wisdom of the people, which I think it's actually back to front. But anyway, so
I'll go down a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah,
it's but yeah, I think that it's very difficult. If you'd asked somebody 2 years ago, before any of this came up, do you trust politicians? Yes or no? Everyone's going to go no. Why would you, right? Any politician, doesn't matter. Yeah, inherently we don't trust them. Because they're humans with a lot of power. And you get any human with a lot of power, yeah, they're going to fail. They're going to be human. Almost every president of the United States has shown us that they're human. They're not superhuman. So it's a very, very difficult situation because nobody knows who to trust. Yeah, like the most basic question, if you look at this whole COVID thing, is, was it planned or was it an accident? And nobody really truly knows. Yeah, like it depends on your belief system and how you've been brought up and where you are in your life and many, many other factors. You know, to think that some guy sold a bat in some market and then suddenly this worldwide,
yeah, we could go down rabbit holes for hours talking about it and not even scratch the surface.
But just in terms of people surviving at home, going through this isolation that I've gone through, if they can't leave their house for more than an hour, my advice is start making lists. Yeah? Start making a routine. Don't rely on the fact that, the majority of people are being taken care of financially, so your bills are covered. Sure, businesses are collapsing and, whatever you focus on will be whatever you become. So if you focus on the collapse of your business, if you start worrying about that and thinking about the future, again, the future is, anxiety is future-based. So the one thing that got me through was learning to be present. Yeah, not worrying about tomorrow, not thinking about what happened yesterday. That's what a list is good for. So I get up tomorrow, I open my diary, it says 1 hour of yoga. It's the first thing on my list. So I get up and do my hour of yoga. Then I brush my teeth. Then I make my breakfast. Then I get the kids up, whatever it is. And I start ticking things off and I can see progress throughout the day. And that goes right through until the evening time. And then I turn the page and I do what's on the next page. Get up, do your hour of yoga, go do this, drop the kids off to school, and you just keep working through that day to day. And if you start thinking about how things used to be, I used to make $100,000 a month running this business, guess what? You're going to become depressed because you're focused on the past. If you then start going, where's this going? When's it going to end? What am I going to do 6 months from now? The mortgage, you're thinking too far into the future and you're going to inevitably become anxious. the only way to not suffer this like bipolarity between depression and anxiety is to stay present. And the best way to get through that is to have a daily list, to have a daily routine that you do. Yeah. Like, sure, your day-to-day stuff might change a little bit, but you have to have a routine for you personally. You get up and you do your hour of yoga or mobility stuff or whatever it happens to be, you know, and if you're not the sort of, if you need variety built in, well, guess what? Tomorrow's Swiss ball day. So then you're going to research all these different Swiss ball exercises. Tomorrow morning I'm waking up, I'm going to do 10 different Swiss ball exercises, and that's the start of my day, and then I take the kids to school and whatever happens, happens. But that's the best way to survive any sort of isolation stuff.
Yeah.
No?
All right. I think we can leave it there. Is there anything else you want to say? If you just wanted to promote anything, I don't know if there's anything to promote right now with everything shut down, but your business, your Facebook page, whatever, if you want, or just
what I would like to know, right? Because probably all of your podcasts are about other people, right? And there's probably quite a few people who are curious about you. Have you done a podcast with yourself? Probably not.
No, but
So what brand are you? Purple or brown now?
I'm brown now.
Hey, was it recent?
Yeah, I was. When did I think October? End of October, start of November when Professor came. Yeah. So that was pretty full on.
So for you with your journey, so what happened with your arm? Because I don't know exactly. You've probably told me roughly. Was it something you were born with? Was it an accident that you happened, or?
Basically it was like started with my elbow, but like you said before about breaking your back, breaking your body, doing extreme stuff. Because I was like into triathlons about 15 years ago or so. Full on sort of got into coaching, the local club on. I'll do half Ironman, but I'd never trained properly because I had sort of injuries, and then my elbow was sort of starting in that process. But yeah, basically started with a sore elbow, had like arthritis. It started off being seronegative arthritis, but then I sort of, in treating that, I hurt my hand. So there's no cartilage in the hands on that side anymore. And sort of I've got issues with the other joints, but that's sort of the main two things. I tore my hip about 2 years ago. That's actually tearing my hip is probably the only jiu-jitsu injury.
Everything's all on the same side?
Everything's on the right side. So like, I think there's an issue with like blood flow, nutrients, but doing jiu-jitsu is actually helps keep me mobile and all that, and helps with all that, the depression and anxiety and all that sort of stuff as well. But physically, it keeps me mobile. I actually hurt my back a couple of days ago digging in the garden a little bit too much. And that's from like not being able to decompress the spine and stuff at home. So I actually had to go to the osteo yesterday.
Yeah, you've changed your lifestyle as well, right? So you used to be on the mat all the time and doing things, and now you're probably a little more sedentary because of the lockdown.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do a lot more physical stuff sort of in the garden and that, but I'm trying not to overdo it, but I guess I did the other day. But we went to the osteo and they're seeing 1 or 2 patients a day and only emergencies, so that actually helped. But it was just for a day. I was like spasming and couldn't sit down, couldn't stand up, couldn't lie down. It was painful. So I got a sort of taste for a day, and it's like my body telling me, hey, take care of yourself. So I got some exercises to do and stuff. But yeah, I'm sort of in the middle of rearranging stuff. So my gym's, my mats are covered in all this furniture and stuff. So I just got to clear all that up and be able to just go in there and sort of do my daily exercises again.
So for
Yeah, it's a
you,
good.
look
Hmm?
for you looking at black belt, for example, right?
Mm.
Yeah. How you
Uh,
feeling? I know you're like, oh, but it's a long way away, and it's not
uh,
something I'm really aimed at. But it's just around the corner for you. So yeah,
yeah,
how, how you feeling about that?
look,
I get very excited about brown belts. Yeah.
I'm so happy I got brown belt, but uh, when I get my black belt, I want to be able to sit there, demonstrate the techniques, even if there's something I can't do properly, at least be able to show it somehow
Yeah.
to be able to
Don't,
teach
you
it.
don't need to be good at everything.
No, but like
That's not
the
your job, right?
physical ability of being able to, like the certain, because I can't physically move the hand.
Yeah.
That's as far as that risk goes.
Yeah.
And like both sides, it
So
doesn't.
is that added motivation for you to try and get that going? To try and make your hand work in a way that it's not going to? Or
Uh,
are you like, or are you going to go like, I'm a little bit different. Like my hand doesn't do that.
mm. Well, my motivation's more to sort of want to strengthen and fix everything around it, make sure it's the whole thing supported as much as possible. And like with diet, the inflammation's actually like, diet's been pretty shit probably the last month or so, but the I've been sort of on top of the inflammation in terms of, and like on top of my body weight since I lost weight. I haven't put it back on yet. That was from when I was with Steve Maxwell a few years ago. Um, but yeah, it's like with diet and jiu-jitsu, I was sort of managing it really well, and I was actually getting better and better. And I even competed in January, which
So do you
um,
find diet affects your inflammation quite a bit?
the guys fix it.
No. Do
What
you
do you mean?
find that your diet
Mm,
affect your inflammation quite a
mm.
bit? It does.
Yeah, I think so. Especially like because like back in the day, like when I was doing triathlons, I was seeing a dietitian, like, I was following all the things, the high carb, low fat, but it's the low fat's the killer. I respond way well to the high fat diets. I did carnivore diet
Are you a Joe
for
Rogan
about
fan?
6 months.
Yeah, you're a
Uh,
Joe, you're you
yeah,
watch Joe Rogan stuff a bit.
I haven't so much probably since the COVIDs. I've been like going deep down rabbit holes in sort of other podcasts, other sort of things, and
Yeah.
like medical, like
The,
spiritual
the reason I say that is
aliens, and
the
yeah,
reason I say that is because you've heard of Jordan Peterson. He's a really famous
yeah. I
psychologist.
was a
So
huge
yeah,
follower of
so
his.
yeah, okay. So his daughter had all sorts of issues, and then she
Yeah,
went on, and then during the podcast with Jordan Peterson and Joe, then Jordan Peterson brought that up about his daughter,
mm,
and then Joe got her on the show, and then that the kind of tidal wave that's kind of started with this
mm,
kind of carnivore diet.
yeah,
And it's funny because my partner and I were talking about just before about what suits you kind of historically, like
mm.
where your family comes from and your genetics and stuff like this influences it a lot. Um,
Well,
so yeah.
I'm trying to get back in touch with the epigenetic sort of memory. Um,
So where do you feel best on like a high protein, high fat diet, right?
yeah, pretty much. Like I was sort of doing keto. I've sort of tried the Gracie diet. I've done all sorts of diets, sort of vegan,
Yeah.
done like
Because I change my
metabolic
stuff like
diets.
day to day. I change like I don't say that I have a diet, right? I'm aware of what all these different foods do, the pros and cons. So like recovery days, because I'm not doing high intense exercise, I have a lot more fat and a lot more protein on my rest days and
Mm,
recovery days.
yeah.
And then if I have intense days, then I have a lot more carbs.
Mm,
So I don't, I don't have like a fixed belief. I kind of just I go, okay, so these things do this. So on this day, I'm going to eat more of this, and on this day, I'm going to eat more of that. But obviously, I'm interested in what people are experiencing
Well,
themselves. So.
the main thing that I've stuck to, and it's really good, is pretty much intermittent fasting. Like I won't have breakfast for a while.
Yeah.
I might have, like at the moment, without moving, like unless I'm doing a lot of movement, exercise and stuff, I only really need to have one meal a day. Like a dinner. I might have something small, like a snack and then dinner. But yeah, I've just have my coffees in the morning, but that's a whole
And
other
you're
story, whether or not that's good. But
basically isolated all day. You're stuck at home and can't do anything.
yeah, but if I didn't have to do jiu-jitsu and didn't visit family, I would be at home stuck. I'd be comfortable stuck at home. But jiu-jitsu is so beneficial to me that it sort of gets me out of that mode and gets me out there, gets me meeting people, gets me sharing my immune system, my microbiome and all that. Yeah.
So it kind of pulls you out of your shell. So you're pretty comfortable by yourself. But do you find that
I used to have a stutter. Like I wouldn't be able to talk like this, like on a podcast. I'd be like, stuttering a fair bit, especially getting nervous, or if I lose my train of thought, I'll be like, oh my God, or, but
do you think
don't
do you
stutter
think
anymore.
a lot of, because I train quite a few juniors who are like, I've got one client who's got Asperger's and things like this as a junior A-lead athlete, and what I find is that there's a huge proportion of people who have anxiety or depression or mental stuff going on who pursue endurance sports, because it's a good way to stay away from other people for long periods of time because you're training by yourself. It's also a really good way to stay away from home, right? And it's usually some form of escapism. So do you, like, I don't know anything about your past. We've never spoken about any of it. But stuttering and the comfortable with isolation, staying away from other people, and the history of endurance sports suggests that jiu-jitsu is probably very good for you, like dragging you out of your shell, forcing you out of your comfort zone. Do you think it was very helpful in you overcoming that speech impediment and having the self-confidence to?
I mean, it wasn't really an impediment. Like it was just like occasionally I'll stutter, like on a few words here and there, but mainly sort of from nervous and. But like, it wasn't like a huge. I don't remember it as a huge thing. Like until my friends reminded me a few months ago, I was like, oh yeah, I did sort of have a little stutter. But in saying that, when I spoke to friends, I never had a stutter. I was always comfortable and open and had like.
When you're around people you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and I'll be very open and stuff, but which leads to being able to be taken advantage of. But that's all part of life and learning and stuff. Because I think empathy, very empathetic. So it's like, I think as a kid that was like led to a lot of gullibility.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you hope that everybody's kind of like you, trustworthy and caring and things like that. But
I know that's not true.
Yeah, there's a lot of narcissists out there, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm very much the same. It's probably why I can relate to you. I can kind of get a sense as to what's going on. But I think I don't know. I think I would like the whole world to do jiu-jitsu. I think it's such an instrumental art in the development of humans. When I've spoken to my instructors, like high-level judo guys who've taught at the Kodokan, 8th, 9th degree black belts in judo, it's compulsory at school in Japan. Taekwondo, my 8th, 9th, 10th degree black belts in Taekwondo and Hapkido have told me about how beneficial those arts are in the schools. You know, now you've got Jiu-Jitsu in the Arab Emirates, for example. That happened, 15 years ago or something? Then knowing who I was prior to Jiu-Jitsu and then seeing like how much of an impact it has on me as an adult. Even now, like I haven't trained in months. And then when I go back to it, I'm like, wow, this is just incredible. You know, the closeness and unity of it is different than like in a karate school where you're kicking and punching and the object is really to hurt each other. The unity that a jiu-jitsu class offers, I think, is unique of all sports and all martial arts. And to see what's happening around the world with all the different jiu-jitsu academies not being able to practice properly, it's amazing seeing them start to open again and seeing coaches who maybe beforehand were maybe just a little bit full of themselves, you know, making good coin, and you know, they got their black belt and they got some pretty successful academies going on, and seeing them lose it all, lose all of it. And then really truly appreciate like what they have, you know, not even from a financial point of view, like that's not what they're feeling that they're losing. You know, they're starting to recognize, and I'm sure it's the same for all the students too, that the students themselves are going, wow, like this is what jiu-jitsu brought me. Like, I mean, I've still got thousands and thousands of marketing forms from students about what it is, why they wanted to join jiu-jitsu and learn martial arts. Like self-defense is like 5th on the list, 4th or 5th on the list. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not why they're there. Yeah. Most people are there to get fit and meet people. Yeah. And build self-confidence. Like, they're the top 3 things.
It also builds community, which has been devastated lately. So just our conception of community's changed. So, well, it's going to have to change for this new normal. But the community aspect is huge. The smashing of the ego aspect is huge. And if there was one thing I would recommend for the betterment of your life, jiu-jitsu would be it, hands down. Because, like, apart from going to war, you're not going to learn a lot of the lessons that you do sort of through jiu-jitsu and, like, the humbling aspect.
Yeah, adversity builds intimacy.
And the thing with jiu-jitsu, like the Gracie jiu-jitsu, that we always on the ground fighting, tapping each other, getting the ego, that forces the dissolving of the ego, as opposed to in the older traditional martial arts where they couldn't go 100%. They never really knew, like they wouldn't punch each other as hard as they could, you know, within the school anyway, sort of thing.
Yeah. I think that you go through different periods, right? So, like, as you go through the different grades, you know, things change a lot. You know, when you're a white belt, you get beaten up a lot, you know, and so you're very humble and, like, willing to learn and eager to learn. And then you get your blue belt and you get a little bit of an ego. You're like, oh, I know some stuff, and you can beat up your friends at barbecues and stuff like that.
And then you lose your brain at blue belt as well.
Yeah, and like you can beat up some white belts and stuff, and there's a little bit, you know, there's a lot of white belts that have left, you know, there's not that many left, and one of the few, and then you get to purple belt, you know, and like purple belt is kind of like the belt of evil, right? So, you know, like it takes a really long time to get off purple belt, you know, purple belt purgatory. But now you've got almost the same skills as the black belts. Like black belts have to watch out for purple belts, right? Because they can get you. But purple belt is not going to probably get caught by the blue belt or the white belt. So he's got a bit of an ego, and I think that purple belt is really where you start to get your ego coming in. Like, there's no one in the street's going to take me like that, like it's not going to happen, and I think that you have to get through that. And then when you get to brown belt, because you're not sure as a purple belt whether you're going to get your black belt or not. Like, you really don't know. Like, you're really busting your butt and wanting to kick ass and take names and stuff like that to prove that you're worthy of getting a brown belt. But I kind of see it as like a bell curve, like purple belt's at the top. White belt, you're climbing, blue belt, you're climbing, purple belt's the top, and then brown belt, you're kind of on your... It's an easier slide down there. You've been through all the hardship, you've learned all the lessons. Like, the worst belt to try and get is a blue belt, because you don't know anything as a white belt, right? The whole world's against you, right? But as a purple belt, you get a bit of ego, you've got a bit of bravado, you can kick some ass. And you have to kind of let go of that to start getting your brown belt. Purple belt, I think, is a lot about favorites. Yeah, you have a lot of favorite techniques that work. And that's your security, right? When something happens, bam, here's my favorite combos. Try and handle that. But brown belt is really about being proficient at a wider range of techniques. Yeah, it's about seeing what's possible and what's there, not just your favorite things. You're not going to fall back on your favorites. They're there always, and they probably always will be, but you've got to work outside that repertoire. Yeah, but it's a downward slope, and you feel it already. Like, how much easier is it going to be for you to get your black belt than when you were a purple belt trying to get your brown belt? Yeah?
Yeah, well...
It's totally different, right? And I think that transition, as you move through those different changes in your ego, really is a massive, massive thing. So every single belt has a change in attitude that needs to parallel it. And as you move through those belts, that really changes who you... Like, there's no way that you're the same person at black belt as you were at purple belt, as you were at blue or white belt.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. You kind of like... It's almost like you are leveling up in the game. You're going to the next level, and then you got the extra powers. And it's like, even just as a metaphor, it works out well.
Yeah, for every belt, I had a mantra that went with it. Right? So blue belt was composure under pressure. Yeah? Right? You're not really good at anything. But under pressure, you've got an idea as to where you're going and what you should be doing. Whether you can do it or not, who knows? Yeah, right? You're kind of street smart, you know some stuff. Composure under pressure. Purple belt was purely combinations. So you take what you learned as a blue belt, you start to bring things together that work in unison, right? And it's the first time you start to not to fight for a single technique. You're not just trying to choke the guy from the guard and the guy's clearly posturing and you're never going to get it, right? Because his arms are outstretched. So you start to go, ooh, 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 outstretched arms. So you start to create this combination between your choke, which is delivering the arms, and the arm bar, right? So it's all about combinations. And then brown belt was have no favorite technique. Yeah?
Yeah.
Right? That's the way I define it. So
yeah, drill the moves you don't know. Or not your favorite.
Yeah, most people start with their wrist locking and stuff like that at brown belt because people are starting to do all these silly things and they just open their eyes, and rather than just see the choke and the arm bar, there was like 100 other things they could have done in the meantime, right? Yeah. In black belt was simply timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're not really adding more techniques as a black belt because you've already got a ton on your plate. You've got stacks to learn. Yeah. But what do you do as brown belt and when do you do it as black belt? That's the way I always do it, yeah, is choosing the right moment. Like the perfect technique at the wrong time is the wrong technique.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just trying to make life easier for yourself, yeah, by not forcing things. So that's what I always saw as a transition through the belts. and that I was, so when I had my like blue, purple, brown, and black belt like posts or whatever they were, the things in the academy with the techniques and stuff written on them, then I would always have like a little mantra on them, so that there wasn't just a physical thing that you were trying to achieve, like that there was a mental and emotional change that you were trying to acquire as well. Yeah, and it happens anyway for the most part.
Yeah, well, I think when you get to professor's level, he's like, us jiu-jitsu guys, we're lazy. And so he just cuts through all the crap and just like, and it's like he'll show you like, just do this slight adjustment, and you've just like blown through all the defenses, and it's like, what the hell was that? And it's like right in front of you, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, when people whinge about paying like $150 a month for like classes, I go, okay, try this on for size, right? I would spend $10,000 and travel to the other side of the world to go learn jiu-jitsu. Then I'd spend $500 on a private lesson. Yeah. And the guy would go, just move your foot like this. And that would solve a problem I'd been having for 5 or 6 years. And I want to shoot myself in the head because I'm so stupid. Yeah. And you're complaining about paying $150 for this month, a whole month of jiu-jitsu, where you can learn all of this stuff and have all these amazing experiences. Try spending 10 grand to learn to move your foot in a certain angle or to have your hip in a certain place.
Yeah.
And to just feel like you know nothing. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? We're talking the same language. And so, but that's unraveling that onion, right? Is that a white belt gets an onion and he's like, okay, I've got the onion. And then the blue belt unravels one layer. And then the next, and so on and so forth. And that's the amazing thing about jiu-jitsu, is that there's just, and eventually you'll get to like Pedro's level, where you've got, a slice of that onion underneath a microscope, and you're looking down at the cells of it and starting to understand, like exactly what makes it work.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It's really depressing.
But yeah. Anyway, enough about jiu-jitsu. I think I think that's good. I think we'll leave it there. Not sure what else to say. I think this going to be a long one, this one.
COVID. Let's get back on the mat and start rolling.
Yeah, that's it. I can't wait. But look, when this started, when the first lockdown happened, I pretty much told myself I was under no illusion that I pretty much said to myself, I don't think we're ever going to do jiu-jitsu again, at least for quite a while. That's something like that's helped me, like sort of like accept all that, like adjusting the goalposts and changing and then reaching that post and then maybe
a long way away, right? Well, so anything other than the vision you created is a good thing.
But it's like, well, I'm not in that mindset of next week I'm going to do. It's like, I haven't. That might be extreme, but like that's what you need in a positive for me. Yeah. But anyway,
have you had a lot of people, like other guys in the academy, contacting each other and chatting online and talking about what they're going through? Are you aware of anybody else's struggles or anything like that?
Not personally, but I mean, there's a few. We have a like a Facebook chat group that people post on. I know a few of the people are. I know some of the girls are in contact with each other. I know like a few of the guys, but it's hard. Unless people sort of go out there, put themselves out there, or say, hey, I'm feeling down. You'd have to actually ask them how you're feeling and go. And
usually the worse that people feel, the less they're going to say. So what you'll tend to see is, the people who are usually quite vocal like this is as someone who's come pretty close to suicide a couple of times, and I've helped a few people who have come close, then generally beware of people who are normally quite vocal, saying very little. Yeah, the less people say, like you'll get people out there who are like, I'm on the verge of suicide, and they'll go on and write like pages and pages and pages about it. They're fine probably, right? But it's the person who just writes, I'm over it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So for anybody watching this, yeah, right, then, you know, like stay in contact with other people, and generally the people who are quite chatty online and writing lots, for the most part, I think are okay. But if you suddenly see a big drop in somebody's output, if you see a message that's out of character, reach out to them, because when you get down that deep rabbit hole, you get to the point where you don't think that it's worth reaching out anymore. Yeah. So, yeah, be kind to each other, and don't be scared to reach out and ask somebody if they're okay or not.
Yeah, for sure.
If you think that someone else is not okay, the best way to start the conversation is by saying how you're not okay.
Yeah.
Open up first.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, just tell them how you're eating a shit sandwich, and then hopefully their shit sandwich doesn't taste or smell as bad.
Yeah, but yeah, because everybody's suffering, yeah, especially all the guys in Melbourne, I mean around the world. And too often, especially as guys, because we don't tend to form groups the same and open up and express ourselves the same way as like most women do. If a guy contacts you and go, hey man, how are you doing? I'm feeling shit. I felt really bad and really negative about these things. How are you doing? Yeah. Then it just starts the conversation. So yeah, there needs to be more conversations around the mental health aspect of lockdown and what's costing people. But I think that it's costing so many people so much. People are staying quiet about how they're feeling, you know, because I think that they don't want to confess how they're feeling, how bad they're feeling, because one day the sun's going to come out and COVID will be over, and they might regret saying those things.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, like, not having a goal and not being able to do a lot of stuff. That's why I've been in the garden building up my veggie patch. And it's like, I have to do it. If I don't have something like that to do, I'm just going to be sitting on the couch, and stagnation leads to suffering, you know? And it's like the stagnation in the mind as well.
I don't know how I'd cope with it. I really don't.
But I've sort of been dealing with a lot of these issues for the last 5 years, a lot of financial and a lot of, going through a lot of stuff in my brain. But so I think now I'm actually more prepared to be able to deal with this whole COVID thing. And I'm actually in a way more positive mental state, which is ironic, but yeah, I don't know. It's almost like I've been preparing for this for a while, and I've sort of I went through a lot of stuff in the last few years, financial and, family stuff and a lot of things, and death of our dogs like last year, which was, got to me way more than I thought it would. But and it's just like I went through a lot, and I just felt when COVID happened, it's kind of like I've already been through this, and then I'm sort of just observing everyone else, and everyone's freaking out and going crazy, and and I'm just observing and going, what the hell's going on? Sort of like so it's like, it's tough, and I've been detaching from like social media for ages, so I'm not usually online much. So, but because of like I don't like the dopamine hits with the fear, the anger, and it's just a lot of hatred there, and it's been all filtered and curated, and and it leads to like the phones and the screens. That all has a negative impact as well. But yeah. Anyway, that's whole
Rabbit
other rabbit holes. But yeah, just like everyone should reach out, and yeah. All right, man. We'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Could talk forever, but
you need to reach out to me. I'll keep an eye on your posts. If there's anything short and too succinct,
yeah. If I start blogging again, you'll be like, "Oh my god, he's crazy." Yeah. If you read some of my other blogs, I'll seem crazy.
I can't wait to come down and join the gang down there again. Get on the mat and have a little roll. I can't wait to see you in your brown belt and experience your new brown belt jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yeah, hopefully I get a few weeks to sort of train before we do that, but that'll be awesome.
I'll give you a couple of months. How's that?
Yeah, a couple of months. Yeah, just
I'm coming for you.
Yeah, cobwebs. Awesome. All right, it's a fight.
Say good day to the guys down there. If you see them, say good day to Phil and all the crew.
I will.
I love you guys. I love you a lot, and I think what you're doing is amazing. Not just with your podcasts, but with what you're doing with your body and your brain, and pursuing an incredibly difficult art with some limited capability. I think you've got a lot to pass on to the world, man. You're doing amazing things.
All right. Yeah. Well, what can I say? Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Yeah. There we go. Got it out of you. Right.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I'm starving. I got to eat.
All right. No worries. Thanks for joining us for that long conversation. And yeah, my battery's about to die anyway, so I think it just did. The battery just died as finishing up. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys later. Us.
Ciao.
All right. Thanks, man. Alrighty, guys. I hope you enjoyed that podcast with Rob. Yeah, it was a pretty fascinating conversation. I didn't really plan any questions, and yeah, we spoke for 3 hours, so it was pretty interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed all that. If there's any questions you have, any comments, yeah, just leave them down below. Hit that like, hit that share, and just remember to reach out to family and friends, and yeah, just keep your networks close. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll catch you next time. Us.
Yeah, you look very Vietnam vet with that hat and the stars and stripes on your chest.
Yes,
the beard and all that.
It's the Molon Laver. I was from a Vegas shooting range. All the guns, what was it, what was it called, 7.52 range or something. Went and shot a 50 cal.
We were going through.
We'll go through the injuries. You went through the old school sort of days.
One thing we missed out on is like it's funny because I was thinking about it today that in like 98 or 98 or something like that, after my first national championships, I did, you know how I said that I was doing flying arm bars in the first competition because I came back to the academy on the Monday morning and got asked, and they're like, hey, show us that move. I landed on my head and I got complete amnesia. No, total. Like I lost my whole life. So that's like everything. I had to relearn my whole life. So it's something that kind of like we skipped by. But yeah, so touching on injuries, that's because like literally I just become the national champion and 3 days later I didn't know anything about martial arts.
And like,
it's been a really crazy journey, as you can kind of tell already. Like without me going into
well, we could take it from there. We could talk about that. Sure. We could talk about that for a bit, that injury. And going through amnesia, that sounds pretty full on. And like,
trying to relearn who you are,
you
know, and it's pretty different. There's like the whole history of my martial arts life has been bizarre. And we're just touching on the jiu-jitsu part. Like, you know, I mean, I started training, I was like 4 years old, and it's been a really bizarre. Everybody that I know says I should write a book, and every time I think about it, I'm kind of too busy to sit down and start doing anything about it because it's just been bizarre, like the whole thing, the whole thing. But yeah, wherever you want to start off, or are we already started?
I reckon we'll just add that as a bonus at the end. I reckon if you want. So I think we went for, and if you see me looking at the other screen, that's because that's where your face is. So I'm like talking to you. Fair enough. You think I'm like, woo.
He's lost eye contact.
Because it's so weird looking straight into the camera. It's like, but your face is there.
When I take photos on my iPhone, I notice I'm always looking off to one side. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and look at the camera so it looks like I'm looking, and then that looks weird. So it's